Let me start by saying that my brother and I are extremely experienced desert campers, and we have lived near deserts pretty much our whole lives. I have never in my 20 years of life ever for 1 second believed in anything paranormal or anything to do with evil spirits. Unlike my brother, who has always sensed presences and has been able to see mostly what we call Djinn, also known as demons. Until last night, which is safe to say marks the last time that we'll be camping alone in the desert. We always have the same place we like to go when we camp with minimum effort, and our day started as normal as ever. But as we got closer and closer to our destination, I saw my brother's mood completely shift. And when I asked him what was wrong, he shrugged me off and told me to just keep driving. When we arrived, I felt completely fine, but my brother was still unusually quiet. It was around 1 p.m. at that point, and we were planning on leaving around 12 or 1 a.m. Because of the heat, we made the terrible decision to set up under a few trees and a source of water, which, in Middle Eastern culture, is where the jinns live at night. Not that I believed at that time, of course. However, we still set up our camp and continued on as normal. Now, my brother always says that when he feels a presence, or several in this case, he gets extremely unlucky. First, he almost dropped a box of coals on his foot. Then, he spilt an entire bottle of Coke on his phone. Then, he dropped it into the sand and then proceeded to smash his elbow on the edge of the chair he was sitting on, which is now very swollen. And last, but certainly not least, when he was looking through one of our boxes, he felt something cold and sharp pressed right against his arm, and he realized it was an unsheathed knife. He packed it with its case the previous night, and he later said it felt like something pushed his hand into it, right where his veins are. All of these events consecutively, within a matter of a few hours, was certainly making both of us uneasy, and I, for the life of me, couldn't figure out why he was suddenly so unlucky. As I was starting to question his clumsiness, a random couple appeared out of nowhere, informing us that they were stuck in the sand and needed help. We drive a Land Cruiser, and they had a Nissan Altima, so we didn't expect to encounter so many issues that we did. We first dug them out without any issues, but as we pushed them out of the sand, they got stuck again. If you know anything about dune bashing or desert camping, then you understand the physics behind how wheels get stuck in the sand, and the way this Nissan was stuck was incredibly unusual. It was literally stuck somewhere with plenty of space available for grip. And later, my brother said that as we were digging them out of the sand, that's when he started feeling an evil presence around us, but he didn't want to say anything as to not ruin the trip and freak me out. So we ended up having to tow them out of the sand, which, again, was far harder than it had to be. First, our tow strap broke off their bumper. Tow straps cost about $200 and was fine, but their bumper was slightly damaged. Then we almost got stuck ourselves, and a 20-minute job took more like 90. When we came back to our camp, we noticed how everything around us had gotten unusually quiet. The area we were in has hundreds of birds around, and as far as we have seen, 3 cats who sometimes pay us a visit. But there wasn't a single noise at all, other than our fire, which was dying out unusually quickly. It had gotten dark quickly, so we scrambled to build a fire to cook our dinner before we were asked to help the couple, and I had noticed the silence, but it didn't bother me. However, my brother suddenly grabbed my hand as we were sitting down to eat, and said, with clear fear in his voice, that we should do so as quickly as possible, and that he didn't feel safe. To ease both of our minds, we prayed. We're Christians, so of course we thought it would help. But I think it accelerated everything that happened, and just made whatever was there with us angry. We finished our dinner, and me being the skeptic, I was completely fine and pretty much just humoring my brother, until I started getting the nagging feeling that it was time to pack up and leave. It hit me like a wave, and I was quite taken aback by the feeling, so I voiced it to my brother, and he agreed that we should pack up right away and leave. We started packing up at a normal pace, and that's when we heard a sound very close to us on the opposite side of the pond, which wasn't that big. Something that I could only describe as the sound of death itself, and it seemed to go on for several minutes. When I say that we looked at each other in absolute fear, I genuinely mean I was ready to have a heart attack right there and then. At that point, after being frozen for a few minutes, and quite reasonably so, after hearing that bellowing screech so close to us, we turned on the car, drove it back so we could see with better light, and just started throwing everything into the car without much care, but with a whole lot of urgency. Sound of twigs snapping and footsteps all around us, then the shadows from behind the trees. I tried to get those shadows to change shape, walking around the trees and moving the lights, but nothing. It looked like there were people just staring at us the whole time, and you could really feel it, too. We felt like we weren't alone, and that we weren't with friendly entities either. We also noticed that all 3 cats were huddled right behind our car, away from the trees, so they weren't the ones snapping the twigs. I felt like whatever was there was getting closer, and I have never felt anything like it. It was a gut feeling, and you just know it's one of those natural instincts that you shouldn't ignore. Thankfully, we were able to pack up quickly, but it was still very silent, and at this point it was around 8 p.m., and it was unusual for that. I personally think I was most terrified as I was driving away back onto the main dirt path to leave the desert. I know cars very well. I know how they drive in the sand, and I know our car especially well because we've had it for so long. I could instantly tell that the steering was off and completely fighting against me. The sound of twigs snapping was still all around us, and it was loud enough to be heard over the sounds of the car. And on the path was what seemed to be like every bird in the area, just standing there and staring at us until we got close enough to force them to walk, not even fly, away. At one point, my brother just grabbed my shoulder and told me very sternly to just keep looking in front of me, and under no circumstance to look through the window. We were in a part of the desert where we had to pretty much drive through the whole of the accessible areas to get onto the highway, and there wasn't a single person around us. The only thing we saw was a very clearly abandoned Toyota Hilux, positioned behind a small dune and hidden by the trees, but was far enough from our campsite to be easily ruled out as the source of the original screech. The worst thing I saw was as we were getting close to the exit, we saw standing in the middle of the path, staring directly at us, a deer. I've only ever seen one deer in the 16 years of living here, and that was in someone's garden as a pet. It's safe to say that I was in complete shock, and the deer wasn't moving at all until I got close enough that we could practically smell the thing before it slowly walked off the path while looking right at us. We quickly moved past the deer, and again my brother, with a grasp and then very sternly said to keep my eyes right on the road. I asked him when we got on the highway what it was that he kept seeing, and he very reluctantly told me that he kept seeing large figures around us anytime we went through a bend, and they were all pointing either right at us or ahead of us. We were still yet to encounter anyone, but we still very clearly heard sounds all around us. When I saw the exit, I was happy as I ever have been, but that quickly faded when once again we saw another deer standing right in the middle of the road, slowly walking away and looking right at us. Except this time, it didn't really look like a deer, more like a kangaroo mixed with a deer. And its eyes were milky, and it looked rotten and horrible. But I didn't much care. I just stepped on the gas, and fortunately, it had gotten out of the way in time. When you exit the desert, you can either turn right onto a long stretch of highway, or you can go left and go through a small town, and then take the back streets to a parallel highway. As I was about to turn right, my brother once again, with the same tone of voice, said to go to the town and to go left. Later, he once again said that he saw a line of figures pointing ahead of us. So if we would have gone that way, we wouldn't have made it home in one piece. Thankfully, as we made it farther and farther away and closer to our home, the gut feeling of being watched was going away, and of course, having never experienced something like this before, I was distraught and wanted to talk about it. My brother told me as we were going home that because we were alone, the Djinn wanted to mess with us, that they wanted to scare us and most likely cause us harm. He also said that they caused bad luck and that he could feel them the second we entered the desert, which explains his clumsiness all day and the car that got stuck in such an unusual manner. This is also my younger brother by 3 years, and naturally any time he ever told me about this sort of thing, I always just dismissed it as him scaring himself. I can excuse the sounds we heard and the shadows we saw that night. I can excuse the gut feeling of just being scared. But I cannot excuse the 2 deers we saw staring right at us, and I cannot excuse the car just randomly fighting against me as I was driving. The deer completely freaked me out, as did the tone of my brother's voice, and it's safe to say, we're not going camping there again. I'm never dismissing my brother when it comes to this kind of thing again, and I am so thankful that we made it home safely. I just spent the summer out in the middle of nowhere in Florida, working at a summer sleepaway camp. This camp owns over 100 acres of pure forest, and before it was a camp, it was an air base. For quite a few years now, maybe much longer, counselors and campers alike have been having weird experiences out there with tall shadow people. Normally there's a lot of fun storytelling at camps, but there is an eerie amount of correlation between some of these stories I've heard about this specific thing. Some of these people who have had these experiences don't know the stories from the others, like new campers having the same experiences as counselors from years ago. They all describe the same thing: tall, thin, shadowy figures of men, sometimes one, sometimes multiple. Their heads are apparently quite a bit taller than the top bunks in the cabins, which is a good 8 feet at least. Campers have described them as having to duck to get through the doorway. Twice in the past couple years, an entire cabin has seen these things. Usually, the counselors would think the kids were trying to mess with them, but because of the sheer amount of these similar reported experiences from campers, it's being taken more seriously. I feel like something weird is going on, especially when multiple 13-year-old boys are crying because they're so freaked out. On one of these occasions, the campers said these shadow figures came into the cabin and pushed their bunks around. The next morning, marks were left on the floor where the bunks had been moved. On a different occasion, only one figure came in and just stood, facing the corner, and the entire cabin witnessed this. On multiple occasions, only one camper has seen this figure, and it has only stared at them from the middle of the room. I myself had not had any strange experiences all summer, except for one. I was in the cabin on the counselor's side, about to take a nap, but was not asleep yet, just recently laid down. I was on my side facing the wall. There was nobody else in the cabin. Twice, within the 45 minutes I was there, something sat on the bed behind me. The cheap mattress sagged a bit, like if a person sat down, and I rolled a little. Of course, when I turned around, nothing's there. This happened to me and my girlfriend I was dating back in the summer of 2014. This all took place in South Carolina, and my girlfriend and I wanted to take a camping trip. We initially tried to go to a place 45 miles from our hometown, but they were going to charge us double what we thought we were going to pay for. We decided to head back, and it just occurred to me that there's a spot very close to where we live. Now, I will say it's more boondocking and off-grid. We didn't have to pay for anything, just parked the car and we got out. This place is quite gorgeous. There's a historic bridge and trail. Also, some of the oldest railroad tracks in the South. We got there before sunset, so we had plenty of time to pitch the tent and set everything up. There were a few cars when we arrived, but they were most likely hikers and would be gone by nightfall. The only thing that made us uncomfortable was a busted up and rusted old white van with no license plate. We both pointed it out, thinking it was weird, but we shrugged it off and started walking to a good place to set up camp. After several hours, around 3 a.m., following some quality time spent with her and taking in all the nature and then going to sleep, we started to hear this obscure singing and walking around our tent. Anytime you hear commotion that early in the morning, nothing good can happen out of it. I peered my head out of the tent to see what was going on. I didn't see anything or anyone, but nonetheless, I didn't want to stay in that area, and we were both freaked out. Just because I couldn't see anything doesn't mean it's not there. I barely did a decent walk around our tent. As we were quietly gathering our belongings, we swore we heard the singing get louder. I recall words in this song he was singing had. "Now won't y'all come out?" Followed by this raspy laughing. Once we finally packed the tent, that was when crunching on the leaves and his humming is what we heard. We knew this guy was close by, and we booked it. I grabbed her hand and threw the tent and folding chairs on my back. We made sure to run the opposite way from where all the noise was coming from. Luckily, we set up camp fairly close to the parking lot because I could see lights through the trees. As we ran and scurried away from whoever was chasing us, we noticed the lights from the parking lot wasn't just the street lights, but also, to our horror, it was that old rusty white van we saw at the beginning. We hurried up the hill, just hoping this guy was alone. His van was right in front of me. If he had an accomplice, that would be another person to deal with. As we reached the lot, we got into the bright streetlights. I noticed my girlfriend's hand make a slight twitch, and her pace slowed down from that. I could tell she was turning her head to look at our attacker. I heard her gasp loudly, "Come on, don't look, we're almost out of here." She focused back and we continued running in unison. The guy was getting closer as I can hear the noise of the gravel intensify. I heard his wheezing and him barking, "Don't y'all think you can get away?" As we just made it past the van, we split, and I handed her the keys so she could unlock and start the car, and I can throw all of the gear in the truck, and we can make it out of this place. As I frantically laid the camping gear in the back seat and head to the driver's side, that's when my body faced forward for the first time in a while. Every noise this guy was making was close and amplified now. With the car running, I kept my head down to put it in reverse, but curiosity got the better of me. in the brightness of my headlights, this man was a behemoth with a stern, wrinkled face with red, patchy hair, a goatee that had dirt and crud smeared all over it. His eyes were fixated on us, like a scope magnifying on two 10-point bucks. He was wanting to kill. "Get back here," he barked, waving a baseball bat back and forth. I shook my head, and with that I swerved out, and we were on our way out with our hearts racing. In the rearview mirror, we saw the man slam the bat in frustration. A narrow escape. We drove to a Waffle House and spent the rest of the early morning there until sunrise. On Friday, I left work at lunchtime to go for an overnight bushwalk to a remote campsite in the national park that's about 60 kilometers from my work in Canberra. I decided not to take a tent, as I was planning to sleep in a hut that had a fireplace, as it's still winter here. This hut is about a 2-kilometer walk from any fire trails and can only be reached by walking along a narrow foot track that climbs a hill for about 45 minutes. The hut only gets a handful of visitors each year due to how difficult it is to find and reach. My car was the only one in the car park, and I never passed anyone else on the way. There's only one track in and out to this place. When it got dark, I started a fire in the fireplace and had my dinner. I was tired and decided to go to sleep around 8:30 p.m., as I planned to get up early to walk back to my car early this morning. Around 1 a.m., I woke up to the sound of a loud machine, really loud, like being directly under a helicopter or something. When I peered through the hut's window, I could see bright lights flashing around, lighting up the trees, but I couldn't see the source of the lights, which made me think that they were above me. There was no way I was going outside to investigate, so I just sat on a camp chair, wondering what the heck was outside. After a few minutes, both the sound and the lights suddenly stopped, like they had never been there. There was nowhere for anything to land nearby, as the hut is in a very heavily treed area. After a few minutes, I got the courage to go outside with my head torch, and all I could see was some grass that had been slightly burned around the hut. Nothing else seems to have been damaged or disturbed. I stayed up for the remainder of the night and left for my car just before daylight came. There's no way that a vehicle could get to the hut, and I don't think that search and rescue would have a helicopter up at night in such a remote area, and there's no Air Force bases nearby either. The national park doesn't allow hunters, so I really have no idea what it was or what's going on. Hi everyone, welcome to this collaboration. Included are a lot of talented narrators that deserve more attention than they receive. I'm going to have all of their information listed in the description box below. So go check them out, subscribe to their channels, and let them know that Aries sent you. And without any further ado, I hope you enjoy this collaboration, and happy Halloween! I know this sounds totally unbelievable, especially since it happened on Halloween, but I promise, this happened. Thinking about it now gives me the chills, and I can barely type this up. So it was what seemed to be a normal Halloween night, and me and my friend Cameron were very excited to be trick-or-treating. Naturally, we ran ahead of our parents and approached the house at the end of the cul-de-sac. Not completely relevant, but in this house lived a troubled boy named Cash. There were many rumors about him, that he shot his teacher with a BB gun, that he worshipped the devil, that he went to juvenile hall as a kid, etc. So there was a bit of an enigma around the house, but that didn't seem to scare us at the time. After all, we were so caught up in the hype of Halloween that didn't matter. All I remember is approaching the house and a nice lady opening the door. I remember being surprised that anyone even opened the door. Nonetheless, a really nice seeming lady. After all, this was Kash's house. Next thing I know, we're in the house and the door is closed. I don't recall ever deciding to go in the house. The main room to the house was very long and had purple lights illuminating it. We were then led into an elevator at the end of the room, where a pale-faced, gaunt, tall man, dressed in a tuxedo, wearing white gloves, stood in the corner, welcoming us in. We walked in and the door closed behind us, and I remember feeling like we had gone down several floors. The elevator was very dark, but I could tell we were somehow traveling downward in this one-story house. The whole time the man stood motionless in the corner, with his hands at his sides. Then the elevator door opened again, leading to a pitch-black hallway. At this point, I don't know what happened. All I remember is suddenly being outside the house, and our parents were freaking out, wondering where we had gone, and chastising us for going into a stranger's house. I don't know how long we were in there, but it seemed like we were there for only a split second. Yet, I distinctly remember this elevator going down, for at least what felt like several floors. How could this one-story house have an elevator? And who was that lady and that man? I have no idea what actually happened that day. Thinking about it gives me the creeps. I have never mentioned this to my mom or anyone else because it sounds so unbelievable, but I know that something was very out of the ordinary in that house.
I think it's finally time that I write this down. It's haunted me for years, but maybe this will help me move on. I don't know if I can ever forgive myself for what happened that night. I was 15. My girlfriend, her brother, my best friend, and I had come up with the brilliant idea to stay out all night on Halloween. We had the perfect plan. My friend Art, not his real name, and I would tell our parents that we were going to spend the night at Layla's and Will's, not their real names, house. Likewise, Layla would tell her parents that she and Will would be spending the night at my house. I know, it was stupid, but we were confident that our plan would work. I wish the plan had failed. That Halloween night, we'd set out feeling like total rebels. We'd all decided on a group costume, and each of us was dressed as a DC superhero. Will had dressed as Superman, Art was the Flash, Layla was Supergirl, and I was Batgirl. We were all pumped. We had the whole night to stuff our faces with candy, hang out, and do whatever we wanted to. After we'd trick-or-treated for about 3 hours, I'm not kidding, people started shutting their doors. By 12, there wasn't a single light on or door open. We 4 were the only people out on the street, and with the exception of a barking dog, there was no noise. Layla and I were bored, and I asked if we should just go home. Will refused. "You're at a sleepover at my house, remember? And I'm sleeping at yours. Do you want to be the one to admit to your mom that you lied?" "Come on, Will," Art spoke up. He'd been eating a lot of candy and had been pretty quiet for the last few minutes, likely battling a massive stomachache. "This isn't as fun as you said it would be. Maybe it'd be better if we just went home and told the truth. They'd be mad, but maybe we can still have an actual sleepover." Will looked at each of us and realized that he was the only one who wanted to stay out. He sighed and looked like he was about to relent. Then he looked behind us, and his face lit up like a jack-o'-lantern. "What's that?" he said excitedly, already beginning to move towards it. I turned around. Not 20 feet away was a house that I'd never seen before on our street. It looked like a typical townhouse, that's usually what you see in our neighborhood, but it was covered from porch to chimney with Halloween decorations, and not the cheap plastic ones you get at the dollar store, but the quality makes you want to run decorations that give kids nightmares. There were 2 disturbingly lifelike pumpkin-headed scarecrows guarding the front gate, and over 24 skeletons standing at attention in the front yard. Jack-o'-lanterns dotted the porch, each one with a face frozen in agony. A gigantic spider was perched in the show window, looking like it intended to make the shrub it was hovering over its next meal. Bones were scattered across the roof, as if someone had just dropped a handful of them from the sky. And, for the finishing touch, a spotlight hidden among the shrubbery made the entire house glow an eerie purple. Layla and I glanced at each other. How had we not seen this house earlier? Granted, we hadn't been paying close attention to every house we passed, but still, we'd been all over town. We'd have noticed a glowing purple house, right? I turned to ask Art, but he was just as entranced as Will. Before I could blink, he was running towards the house too. Once again, I glanced at Layla. She shrugged her shoulders, as if asking what I expected from two Halloween-crazed boys. I grabbed her hand, and we ran after them. Up close, the house was even more disturbing. The scarecrows eyed us as we walked through the front gate. I tried not to gag as I passed them. Someone had certainly taken liberties to make the yard believable. The things stank like rotting pumpkins. I gripped Layla's hand a little tighter as we passed the skeletons. They must be from one of those expensive artisan websites, I thought. They sure didn't look fake. We walked up the porch steps, with Will shaking from excitement. Art's eyes were practically glowing. I remember wondering, half-jokingly, if they were in some kind of trance. Will rang the doorbell. It was the sound of a church bell and resonated throughout the house. "Trick or treat," we shouted dutifully, although Layla was practically crushing my hand. I was grateful for it. I needed to know that I wasn't the only one who found all of this unsettling. The door was practically thrown open. A gorgeous woman stood in the doorway. She had long legs, thick copper hair that stopped at her shoulders, black eyeliner, and blood-red lipstick. She was dressed in a revealing witch costume, and grinned when she saw the four of us. Well, when she saw the boys. My, I didn't expect to be visited by two handsome heroes tonight." She gave a high-pitched giggle. Her voice reminded me of how ladies in old gangster movies talked. Art smiled and thanked her. Will was just staring at her. I took a step closer to Layla. That's when the lady noticed us. I think she knew immediately that we weren't as captivated as the boys were. Not by her house or her beauty. Sure, she was gorgeous, but she was an adult and I was already with Layla. Her eyes glazed over as she saw us, but her smile didn't waver. I noticed then that she was holding a bowl of candy. She slowly extended it to me. "Candy, Batgirl?" I wrapped both of my arms around Layla and took a step backwards from the lady. I could tell she wanted something, and that it wasn't anything good. "No thanks, we've eaten too much candy already." It wasn't a lie. We'd eaten half of our candy throughout the evening. The woman's smile wavered, and she blinked 3 times, as if it was the last thing she'd expected. I noticed something strange about her eyes. They were kind of cloudy. She turned and offered candy to the boys. Will took a full handful, while Art only took 2, obviously still suffering from a stomachache. I glanced again at the candy. The pieces weren't in wrappers, and it didn't look like any brand I'd ever seen. It sort of resembled malted milk balls, except bigger and lumpier. When the boys had finished their candy, the woman looked at the 4 of us. "You must be parched. Why don't you come in for some apple cider?" She gestured to the front door, which stood gaping open, like a mouth. Layla physically leaned away from the door. She wouldn't go in there for $1,000, let alone a glass of cider. I agreed with her. I forced a smile. "No, thank you." We turned and started to get down off the porch when I realized that Layla and I were alone. Will and Art were gone, and so was the woman. My heart rate tripled. They went in the house. My stomach hurt. Should we call the police? What could we say? That a pretty lady with a spooky yard had lured 2 boys into her house with apple cider? Even if that didn't sound crazy, we were 2 teenagers out past midnight on Halloween. Not exactly what the cops would consider trustworthy. Plus, we couldn't prove that she wanted to hurt the boys. Still, we had to make sure that they were okay. We started walking around the house. On the left side, there weren't any windows. This made sense, though, it being a townhouse and all. The back of the house had a porch, but the windows and doors were all covered. The right side of the house yielded the same results as the left, leaving us only one option: the show window. We maneuvered around the skeletons in the yard and went as close as we dared up to the window. I, being dressed in black and thus harder to see, decided to look in the window, while Layla, dressed in bright red and blue, made sure the lady didn't come out of the house. Before peering in, I took an uneasy glance at the giant spider. Against my better judgment, I touched it. Solid plastic. I sighed and told myself not to be so jumpy. I peered through the window. I was staring at a lit fireplace. It seemed to be the only light source in the room. It was pretty dim in there. Still, I could make out two enormous armchairs on either side of the fireplace. I could make out Art's bright red Flash costume, and I could see the blue from Will's costume. They were both slumped in the chairs, as if asleep. There was a coffee table between the chairs, holding two half-empty glasses of what could only be apple cider. In the center of the room stood the lady. She was standing up as straight as a rod, her arms lifeless at her sides. Then, with no warning, her right arm shot straight up. She held it there for a second, then let it fall. A second later, she did it again with the other arm. Then, I swear, she started growling. As if this was a signal, Will and Art got up. I could tell that their eyes were closed, but they came right over to her. She put her left index finger on Art's forehead and her right index finger on Will's forehead, and she began to chant. Veneninum santiatum, age puer, languorem santias, nesico quomodo, lantianam, loqui, ut alligent. All three of them suddenly began to convulse. Art went down, followed by Will. They both started to kick wildly. Then their kicks became weaker, as if they were losing energy. Then they stopped. I must have made a noise. Layla told me later that tears were streaming down my face. I must have sobbed without knowing it, because the lady turned around. Her eyes were completely blue, with no pupils to be seen. Her mouth was hanging open, with saliva the color of her eyes dripping from her lips, and her face was starting to melt. I screamed. Layla screamed. I shoved myself away from the window and landed flat on my back. The wind was knocked out of me, but I was too scared to care. Layla yanked me to my feet, and we just started running. We charged through the skeletons, which I now thoroughly believe were real. As we charged through the gate, I knocked over one of the scarecrows. Its head smashed to bits on the ground, revealing a human skull underneath. We ran, not knowing where we were going and not caring. We finally ended up in front of my house, and we both collapsed into each other's arms, sobbing. I told my mom everything. At first she thought I was making up a story to get out of lying to her, but one look at our faces and she knew we were serious. She called the cops immediately. When they investigated the strange house, they made a shocking discovery. It belonged to a Miss Smith, not her real name, who was a woman in her 20s and fit our descriptions. But she'd been on vacation in Alabama with her mother for the last 2 days. They never found their bodies. Art and Will remain missing to this day. The police don't believe our account of some life-sucking witch. They believe that a child predator drugged them and ran off with them. I don't think Layla and I ever really got over it. We broke up in 12th grade when she and her family moved away for a fresh start. A few months later, I moved too. We text now and then, but we aren't as close as we used to be. Still, I'm glad I've saved her number all of these years, because tonight I saw something that brought back that traumatic Halloween. A townhouse, bathed in purple light, with skeletons set up in the front yard. 2 of them guard the gate. One is dressed in a Superman costume. The other is dressed as the Flash.
Last month, it was my only child's 5th birthday, and one of the presents I bought for him was a build-your-own teddy bear kit from Target. I got it as the last present and thought that he would have enjoyed the Nerf gun, or the Avenger movies far more, but no. He enjoyed the teddy bear kit more than anything else. At first, he asked me to help him build it since he's only 7 years old, but as soon as I showed him the first step, he asked me in a kind, prepubescent voice, "Dad, I want to do it by myself, please." "Sure, it's your toy," I said as I walked out the door, which he speedily shut behind me. I thought nothing about it at the time, but he spent over 2 hours in there. Every time I tried to open the door, I could hear him get up and run over to block it. I originally thought it was cute for the first 2 times, but I became concerned with why he wanted to keep me out of his room so badly. So after the last time he kept me out, I decided to listen in on what he was doing in there. I put my ear up to the door, and I could hear my son's cute voice say, "There you go, Mr. Teddy. A great big nose for you." My heart got all warm and fuzzy when I heard this, because he really wasn't doing anything bad. But then I heard another voice say back to him, in a low, scratchy tone, "Someone's at the door, Tommy." What? Who could possibly be in there with him? I thought to myself as I swung open the door. As I did, my son was standing right there, far enough away that the door didn't hit him, but close enough that I thought it would. Jumping back a little due to how freaky he was, I looked about his room to see if he had any friends that snuck in to play with him. It was empty. Empty, except for a few toys that darted the floor. And there on his bed was the teddy bear. It was not at all what I would have had imagined a 7-year-old kid with no prior experience or help could have done. The stitching was even, and the buttons were so tightly knit in the proper place. I walked forward to it, about to pick it up as I said, "Wow, son, you really did a good—" "No! Don't touch him!" My son screamed as he lunged in front of my outstretched hand. Why can't I touch him? I just want to see how good you made him," I asked, perplexed. "He says he only wants to be held by me," my son said as he grabbed the teddy bear and held him close to his chest. This didn't seem weird to me at all at the time, because all kids at one point don't like you to touch their things, so I left the room. Behind me, the door speedily shut with a gust of wind that brushed up along my back. I decided to take a nap on the couch, and as I dozed off to sleep, the purring from our cat Snowball kept me awake. He was tucked away in the corner of the room, all curled up in a ball. "Huh? Snowy, what's wrong?" I said in a baby talk tone as I got up and walked toward her. The closer I got, the more she tried to back away into the corner, and I began to slowly lower my hand to pet her, but she nicked my finger with her claws, which she had never done before. I was wondering what had gone into her, until I noticed a large patch of fur missing that left a bloody red skin mark, as if something had skinned it off of her. I wondered how such a thing happened to her, and looked around the house to see if she rubbed up against something that might have peeled it off. That's when I heard the cat scream in agony from the living room. I darted as fast as I could to where she was, and another patch of fur was gone, which left her rolling crazily on the ground, rubbing her blood into the carpet. I quickly picked her up as she fought against me, but soon stopped as I gently petted the top of her head. My mind was spinning on what did this to her, so fast that I was unable to find them, or it as I ran over. I took her to the kitchen cabinet and pulled out some bandages after I had washed off the blood in the sink. She rubbed her head against my hand as I bandaged her up, and then let her go. However, she didn't stray too far from my side no matter where I went. I decided to see if anything was wrong with Tommy, and as I got to the door, I heard the same strange voice from before talking to my son, as if they were having conversation. So I swung open the door and was traumatized to find that the teddy bear now had patches of the cat's fur stitched to him. Why? Where did you get those patches of fur?" I said as to trap him in a lie as I tried to hold back the anger that enraged inside of me. Mr. Teddy got them for me, Dad. He wants to be like a real bear and have fur. Look at how white and beautiful the fur is. It's just like snowballs. Tommy responded innocently as he brushed his hands across the patches of white blood-stained hair on the bear. I didn't know how to react, because the shock hit me so hard that I just stood there, wide-eyed, and muttered, "How did you get the hair off the cat?" "What do you mean?" "I didn't get them from the cat. Mr. Teddy told me he found them." Tommy responded as he stared at me with a face of pure innocence. I then replied sternly, "Are you lying to me, Tommy? Come look at what you did to the poor cat." I said I put my hand on his back, and then saw that he was trying to bring the bear, and I responded by saying, "Leave that bear here." "No, Dad, he doesn't like to be left alone," Tommy responded as he squeezed it in closer. The more I thought about the fur being stitched to it, the more I became sick to my stomach. "Leave it, or you're grounded without the teddy bear," I said as I took it from his hands and tossed it on top of the bed. Tommy was sad, but when I showed him the cat, he seemed very upset. And the cat wasn't scared of him, as I thought she would be. "Look, the same fur she is missing is on your teddy bear. Can you please explain to me why this is?" I said as I pointed at the cat. "I don't know, Dad. Mr. Teddy went and got them and bring them back to me. I have no idea why Snowball has lost fur," he said as he held her tightly. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw it, and when I turned my head, the bear was just staring at me, plopped down on the couch. "I thought I told you to leave that teddy bear in your bedroom," I muttered angrily. "I did leave him. I told you that he hates being alone," Tommy responded as he ran over and hugged the teddy bear, and as he did so, those button eyes never looked away from me. An eerie feeling ran down my spine, and I decided that I had had enough, and so I took the bear back to Target and asked what was wrong with this thing. The clerk just looked with a strange gaze and said, "Sir, we don't sell those here." "What do you mean you don't sell these here? I just bought this not too long ago, from here," I responded while gesturing to the bear. "Sir, we have never sold that at our store. Take a look. We only offer pre-made teddy bears. No teddy bear kits. You should see if you got it from Build-A-Bear Workshop," the clerk said as he showed me all of the things that they sell under the category of teddy bears. I left the store perplexed on why they didn't sell it, and I decided to look online to see if I could find the brand anywhere else. I'm not going to tell you the name of the brand that was on the package, because I don't want you trying to find this devilish creation kit. However, I never was able to find anything more about it, and it was as if it never existed. I decided that it was some weird coincidence, and so I threw him in the garbage at the dismay of my son, who begged me not to do so. But I was not about to have something with bloody real fur stitched into it be in my house. When my wife Lisa got home that night, and we were lying in bed next to each other, I told her about what happened to the cat and everything else that had occurred. She got mad at me for throwing out the bear and said that it was not a teddy bear who did that to the cat. She got out of bed and stormed Tommy's bedroom. I followed closely behind her, and when she opened the door, she let out a traumatizing scream as we saw the bear that I threw away, tucked under the covers, but his head was propped up on the pillow, staring at us. It had Tommy's eyes and ears stitched to its now sadistic, smiling face. It tore open the stitches from its twisted mouth as it muttered to us in Tommy's voice, "Wanna play with me?"
Our Baptism by As the Raven Dreams. Honestly, it didn't take long. I remember a time when we all thought it was so far off, that nothing like this could happen in our fragile lifetimes. Looking back, it's almost laughable. I've been spending my last few days watching videos of how things were. I found a box of DVDs with permanent marker written on them. I have no idea who the people in the videos are. They were filled with recordings of celebrations, birthdays, Christmas, New Year's. There was even one in the pile labeled Family Reunion. It's a bit strange to see that someone out there still put videos on DVDs. It's such an old way of doing things, but if nothing else, I'm grateful. It's been a pleasant escape from existence. Of course, the nostalgia has been putting some strange thoughts in my head. How did we end up where we are? How did we get forced into this situation? Sure, these thoughts are fruitless, but I've never been one for fruit, so I decided to entertain them. I feel like most people would say that we were apathetic, and that's what brought us here. At least that's what they would say if they weren't mostly dead. Maybe they'd be right. It's not hard to get wrapped up in your own life, uncaring of how everyone else is living. Why should I care if my neighbor 2 doors down the way had a bad day and decided to drunkenly take it out on his wife? Not really my problem. Some would probably also push that it was caused by politics, the never-ending squabbling between opposite ends of the same spectrum. More like 2 sides of the same coin, but I don't think it would have made a difference. Sure, the people voted for their leaders, others voted for who they wanted. Sitting here today, it doesn't really feel like the end of everything was partisan. Death is indiscriminate. It doesn't care who you voted for. It doesn't care what you considered wrong or right. Ironically, so are bombs, missiles, bullets. They all just kind of do their own thing. Now, if you were to ask me, I think it was ignorance. We did all we could to steer the country, the world, in the right direction. We were charitable to some extent. There was even a brief moment when everything was set into motion, where we loved our fellow man. Again, laughable. The sirens wailed, the skies lit up, the cities burned, and we wanted to help each other. By then it was too late. Everything had been set into motion. The steps chosen to start anew were already being followed. And with those 3 simple words, we would all meet our end. With those 3 simple words, we would get what we deserved. Our penance for our apathy, our fighting, the wars, the murder, everything our species had ever done. It was then that we were baptized by fire.
I don't think my dog is real. I know this sounds completely bonkers, but hear me out. I've had my dog, Snickers, since I was maybe 7. She's a little terrier, about the size of a cat. She's always been pretty good as far as dogs go, though one time she ate an entire steak and cheese sandwich in the 2 seconds my dad was looking away from it. She's getting old, but still pretty playful. All in all, an ordinary dog. Until a few weeks ago. It all started at the beginning of the month. At around 8 p.m., I was walking up the stairs of my house, looking forward to finishing a sketch I'd been working on for the past few days. When I was about halfway up, I realized I'd left a book I'd been reading on the couch. I turned around and saw something that I'll never forget. Snickers was standing at the bottom of the stairs, looking at me, but she looked strange, almost pixelated. Then it got weirder. I can only describe it by saying she glitched. My dog froze for a moment, then jumped forward up 2 stairs, her pixelated eyes glaring at me. I didn't know what to do, so I just bolted up the stairs and into my room without looking back. The next morning, I forgot all about it, brushed it off as a dream, I guess. At least, I did until that afternoon. I was watching a TV show, I think it was Phineas and Ferb or something, with my sister, and Snickers was sitting on my lap. I was eating Doritos and my dog made it pretty clear she wanted some. I'm not supposed to give food to our pets when they beg, but I figured a chip wouldn't hurt. I was wrong. As soon as she snatched the cheesy triangle out of my hand, she went pixelated again. I glanced at my sister, but she was too absorbed in the show to notice anything else. When I looked back down at my dog, she was shaking. Then, as if nothing happened, Snickers went back to normal and munched her treat. It might as well have been my imagination. Instances like these kept happening on an almost daily basis for around 2 weeks. Every time no one else noticed, and once, it seemed like everything else froze except for the dog and I. Last week, her episodes started getting worse. Way worse. When she glitched, Snickers got this absolutely terrifying look on her face, and even though it was pixelated, you could tell it wasn't a face a dog should be able to make. I've barely been able to sleep since that face started making a regular appearance. This all brings me to 2 minutes ago, when I was playing Minecraft on my iPhone and sitting on the couch with my dog on my lap. It felt almost normal, at least until she hopped off my lap. Which brings me to the present. Snickers is standing on the floor, still as stone, about 2 feet in front of me. She's glitching worse than she ever has, and is so pixelated that if you didn't know she was a dog, then you'd have no idea what she was. Every few seconds she disappears, and then reappears a few inches to the right or left of where she was standing originally. And the noises are awful. It's something between a bark and a scream, and it's piercing my skull. I don't know where they're coming from, because as far as I can tell, her mouth is closed tight. She's coming closer. Instead of going to the right or left, now she's coming forward. The rest of my family is outside. I'm alone in the house, frozen like a deer in headlights, terrified. She keeps coming closer. I'm in a relatively safe place right now, I think. So I'll update you all on what's been going on, though I'm not entirely sure I understand it myself. After what felt like an eternity of watching my dog slowly inch towards me, Snickers stopped moving. She wasn't blinking in and out of existence, and her face looked normal, besides the fact that it wasn't moving at all. Before I could have second thoughts, I jumped off of the couch and ran outside, hoping to find the rest of my family. I almost wish I hadn't found them. As soon as I stepped out the front door, I noticed something was wrong. Very wrong. My mother and father were sitting on the porch, and my 2 little sisters were playing with a football in the yard. But the football was frozen mid-air. My sister poised mid-dive to catch it. My mother's mouth was open in a silent laugh, with my father's subtle smile indicating he just told a joke. The trees surrounding our property weren't moving at all, even though I distinctly remember the weather forecast saying it would be windy. Not knowing what else to do, I pulled my phone out from the back pocket of my jeans to check the news. At first, my phone wouldn't turn on at all. I slapped it against my leg, hoping it wasn't dead. After an agonizingly long moment, my screen lit up. The familiar sight of the Apple symbol somehow calmed me down for a moment, until it suddenly switched to static. I stared in shock for a second or two, then tapped the screen, not knowing what else to do. In response, my phone let out a piercing shriek, causing me to throw the device across the yard on instinct. It only seemed to grow louder. I tried covering my ears while I scrambled for something to smash my phone with. My fingers brushed against a fist-sided rock, and I quickly raised it into the air and brought it back down on my phone, finally silencing the noise. My ears were ringing. I felt dizzy from shock and terror, and when I lowered my hands from my traumatized ears, they were covered in blood. Also, I had no way of contacting anyone, if there even was anyone to contact. I shuddered and pushed that thought away. I half walked, half crawled over to the open garage next to my house, deciding to grab a few essentials and then try to find someone who wasn't frozen. I quickly gathered some canned food and clothes from the boxes labeled donations and threw it all into an old backpack. At the last minute, I picked up the axe that was leaning against the wall of the garage. Then, my balance having mostly returned, I made my way up my driveway and started walking in the direction of my neighbor's house. Where I live, the houses aren't very close together, each one being about a quarter-mile apart. It's not that far of a walk, but I still find myself wishing for the first time that we lived in a neighborhood, so I wouldn't have to be alone in my thoughts for an extended length of time, especially in the crushing silence that my world was enveloped in. As I walked, I saw a flock of blackbirds, frozen mid-flight. I decided to quicken my pace after that. After maybe 15 minutes, I made it to my neighbor's house. The man who lives there, Harold, is nice, but a bit of a loner. When I broke my leg 2 years ago, he carried me home, even though he was in the middle of mowing his lawn. I cautiously treaded up the well-kept walkway and knocked on the front door, hoping Harold wouldn't mind the axe I was holding. When he hadn't opened the door after 5 minutes, I panicked. His car was in the driveway, so I knew he was home. I circled the house, peering through windows as I passed them. After a few minutes of this, I reached the last window. I quickly glanced in and almost didn't see Harold at first. He was sitting on his couch, bolt upright, staring right in front of him, from my perspective to the right. I turned my head to see what he was staring at and saw a television. It was displaying the same awful static that my phone had. Since I didn't want to hear the ear-spinning noise again, I got out of there as fast as I could. I was feeling terrified and at loss. There wasn't anyone else nearby for miles, and I had no means of transportation. Or did I? I sprinted towards Howard's car and tried the door. Luckily, Howard was a trusting sort of person, so his car was unlocked, and the keys were in the glove compartment. Being a newly minted 16-year-old, I didn't have my license, and I hadn't had the time to take a driving class yet. But my father had been taking me to empty parking lots on the weekends to practice, so I had a vague idea of what I was doing. I tossed my axe onto the passenger seat, started the car, and backed it down the driveway, letting out a held-in breath when I was on the road. Thankfully, barely anyone ever drives down my street, and considering the situation, I didn't think I'd be in danger of being pulled over. I slowly drove down the long street, taking care to keep my eyes on the road like my father taught me. After an hour or so of my snail's pace of driving, I reached the end of the road and turned onto a busier street. There were a few cars stopped in the middle of the street, but I avoided them pretty easily. I considered exiting Harold's car, but decided against it when I noticed the people inside were all as still as stone, like everyone else. Driving down the street was eerie, to say the least. After another hour or so, the car made a clanging noise, shocking me. I hadn't heard any noises besides the engine's purr in several hours. The car made a screeching, scraping noise and then stopped. The engine turned itself off and all the lights on the dashboard went dark. After a moment of hesitation, I stepped out of the car and popped the hood open, but quickly realized I had no idea what to even look for. It was unseasonably cold out, even though the sun's position in the sky hadn't changed since this afternoon, so I went back into the car. I decided to get a few hours sleep, but I wanted to search the car first to see if there was anything useful inside. I found Harold's phone in the center console and tried to turn it on. For some reason, it worked like a normal phone, though the clock is frozen. That brings me to right now. I'm typing this with the hope that someone, anyone, will see this and explain what's going on. The screen's starting to get static.
House Sitting, written by Reddit user Certain Shadows. My eyes flew open when a hand clamped over my mouth. "Don't move," the man leaning over me commanded, a knife glimmering in the darkness. A surge of fear jolted through me. Without thinking, I thrust my hand upwards into his face and felt my palm meet his nose with a revolting crunch. When he howled in pain, I hurled myself out of bed and dove into the adjoining bathroom. I slammed the door shut and turned its lock only seconds before he smashed into it. "Get out of there," he shouted. Heavy battering thuds shook the door. "Take whatever you want and go," I yelled back. "I won't call the police. I swear." He fell silent. I held my breath anxiously. For a fleeting moment I thought he was gone, only for my stomach to drop when I heard the sound of the knife's blade gouging into the wood. I realized that he was trying to carve his way through to me. "Please stop. This isn't even my house. The Day family hired me to stay here while they're on vacation." Suddenly, I was struck by a strong scent of rubbing alcohol. I looked down to see clear liquid spreading beneath the door and across the bathroom tiles. "You have only 10 seconds to come out," the man said. "If not, I'll light this match." A dizzying wave of terror washed over me. I gripped the sink to keep from falling. 10, 9. My eyes frantically searched the room for anything to defend myself with. 8, 7, 6. I felt as if I were being torn in half by an excruciating decision. Accept whatever violent fate awaited me outside the door, or perish in a fiery blaze. 5, 4, 3. I flung open my door. The man raised his knife, and I emptied the contents of a hairspray canister into his eyes. He screamed in agony as I pushed past him and ran. I made it to the staircase before he grabbed me by the hair and threw me to the ground. His poisoned eyes were a furious shade of inflamed red. "I'm gonna kill you," the man hissed. He lifted a foot to stomp on my head, but his polluted vision slowed him and gave me enough time to deliver a swift kick to his knee. He lost his balance and stumbled backwards. By the time he realized he was falling, it was already too late. He plummeted down the stairs and landed in a bloodied, broken heap. As I approached the man's crumpled body, I noticed a small blinking light fastened to his chest. Confusion dawned on me when I realized he was wearing a camera. I nearly jumped when his phone began vibrating in his pocket. An unknown number. I answered it silently when a familiar voice spoke into my ear.
"Is he dead yet?"
Mr. Day asked excitedly.
"I can't wait to see the footage."
Everybody's heard of Smokey Bear, but probably few remember Charcoal's cub. In 1990, there was a small forest fire in Waldo County, Maine, burning about 10 acres of wilderness. When the smoke settled, firefighters found the charred remains of a bear cub. For some reason, the city councils of the various towns in the county got together and decided that this gruesome tragedy was a perfect PR opportunity. Or maybe they were less cynical than that and were genuinely concerned about raising wildfire awareness. Whatever their motives for creating Charcoals, the character was a total flop. For several reasons, but mostly because a superior, iconic version already existed with Smokey. I remember attending a Cub Scout meeting at the time where Charcoal's cub made an appearance. Right after the raffle, this guy crawls up on stage in a really ratty-looking bear costume. I think it might have been an old hand-me-down from UMO, where the mascot is a black bear. For some ill-conceived reason, Charcoals was wearing a fucking diaper. I guess to signify that he was a cub. Charcoal spoke in a muffled voice. Somebody had to tell him to speak up, so he had to shout, but we could still barely hear him.
"Don't play with fireworks in the woods, kids. You'll burn it all down."
Smokey has a shovel. Charcoals, bizarrely, had a garden hoe. Needless to say, we didn't see much of Charcoals, and then we didn't see him at all. Until last week. My wife Shelley was due to give birth in a month, and I wanted one last hurrah before buckling down with an infant to take care of. I set things up with my childhood buddies, Lyndon and Terry. We were scattered across the country now, but decided to get back to our roots for a week-long expedition in the Maine woods. Hiking, canoeing, fishing, camping, and drinking. It started out as such an awesome experience. In fact, we were sitting around the fire, downing beers, when I told my friends about how much I was enjoying myself. "This is great," I said. "It's just so pure, you know?" "You know what? I'm going to see if Shelley will move back here. It's such a great place to raise a kid, don't you think?" Lyndon popped the cap off of Sam Adams with his lighter. "I don't know, man. I like it in the city. I mean, yeah, this right here is awesome. But I remember getting so bored. When I have a kid, yeah, we'll do this sometimes. But there's so much shit that you could just walk to from my apartment. Museums, parks, good food." "True," I said. "What about you, Terry? You like it out in San Diego?" "Love it," said Terry. He started packing a bowl. "Fuck winter, man. Fuck shoveling snow and all that. And then you step outside and your dick shrivels up into a toothpick?" "True," I said. We passed around the bowl and thought it over in silence, so it was easy to hear the rustling coming from the woods around us. "Did you guys hear that?" asked Lyndon. "Sounds like something big." The rustling got closer. "Probably a deer?" I said. Terry pulled out a cigarette and lit it. Then we heard a voice shouting from the thicket, sounding rough and raspy.
"What are you dumb motherfuckers doing?"
We all bolted to attention. "What the fuck?" said Lyndon in a hushed voice. "I thought this was part of the park. We're not doing anything illegal here, are we?" "No," I said. "We're fine." Then I raised my voice. Hello? Who's there?"
"You dipshits. You gonna play a game of match throwing next? So you can burn down the forest the fastest."
"What's this guy's problem?" said Lyndon. "You think we've got a nutcase here? What if he tries to attack us?" I got the flashlight from my pack and saw Lyndon rummaging through his. He pulled out a big knife we'd bought for the trip. I shone the light in the direction I thought the voice was coming from, and a moment later I saw it emerge from the woods. It took some time for my brain to process what I was seeing. Standing there at the edge of the thicket was an old, ragged black bear. Patches of his fur were missing, like he had hundreds of thousands of ticks living on him all the time, sucking his blood. When I saw the diaper and the hoe that he was holding, it finally clicked. Tara started laughing. "Holy shit, it's Charcoal's cub, all grown up. Oh man, that's a good one, dude." Charcoals took a step forward. He looked so lifelike, but It had to be a costume, right?
About time for you boys to call it a night, huh?
Said Charcoals in a tired voice.
You idiots do know the proper way to put out a campfire, right? Or were you planning on getting drunk, passing out, and letting the thing smolder all night until a gust of wind comes along and poof? Hasn't rained for 2 fucking weeks here. Did you jackasses know that, huh? Do you even know what the current fire threat level is? It's fucking extreme, you assholes. It's fucking all the way in the red.
Okay, man, said Terry. That's a good bit. I'll give you that. But this is kind of a private party, so why don't you move along to the next camp, huh? Charcoals took another step forward. I saw that he was missing an ear.
Tough guy, huh? Won't be so tough when I hold your face in the flames. See how you like it. This is your last chance. Put out that fire, and your fucking cigarette too, or I'll put you out.
Terry stood up. He always had this temper. Terry, I said, relax. But it was too late. Fuck off, said Terry. Then he flicked his burning cigarette at Charcoals. The cherry hit Charcoals' chest, and I saw a small puff of smoke as his fur singed. Everything was deathly quiet for 3 seconds. Then Charcoals spoke in a low growl.
Pick that fucking thing up,
He said,
and shove it up your ass. You do that, and maybe I'll let you go.
All right, I said, standing up. Everyone needs to take it down a notch. Terry, apologize to the man. Terry looked at me in fury. Me? Apologize to him? He's the one who came stomping into our campsite causing trouble. I sighed. Just say you're sorry, dude, please. Terry turned to Charcoals. I'm sorry, he said. Sorry you're a pathetic fucking loser with nothing better to do than stomp around the woods ruining everybody's fun. Charcoals took yet another step forward.
Last chance, bucko. I want to see the glowing end of that cigarette disappear into your asshole.
Jesus, said Terry. Get the fuck out of here, or I'll stomp your ass. This is your last chance. Charcoals moved with a quickness that I was not expecting. He leaped forward and then had Terry by the throat, lifting him in the air. Terry was kicking his legs in the air, gasping for breath. Whoa, put him down! Lyndon shouted. Charcoals didn't put Terry down. He carried him over to the fire and shoved his face into it. The night was filled with screams, and the sickening smell of Terry's face roasting, and the hair on Charcoals' paw singeing as he held them both to the fire. Please! I screamed helplessly. I watched as Lyndon jumped on Charcoals' back and began stabbing him again and again with the knife. Charcoals roared and let go of Terry, who jumped back from the fire and then started writhing around in unbearable pain. His face looked like it had melted. Charcoals reached out with one hand and easily flung Lyndon away. Lyndon scrambled to get to his feet, but Charcoals was faster. He swung the business end of his hoe at Lyndon's head. It connected with a thunk, and then Lyndon wasn't moving. Charcoals turned slowly to look at me.
How about you? You got any insight to add?
No, sir, I said.
You gonna go ahead and put that fire out?
Yes.
Properly?
Asked Charcoals. Yes.
Tell me how, you knucklehead. Tell me exactly how you're gonna put that fire out.
Drown it. Stir it. Feel it.
Oh, you did not just quote that fucking hack-ass fancy boy smoking fuckface to me. I know I must have misheard you, but yes, do that. Right now. And if I see one wisp of smoke rising up here, I will come back and end you. Are we clear on that? Crystal clear?
Yes, I said.
Good. You assholes got off easy, you know. I just want you to know that. I'm getting soft in my old age, I guess.
I looked at Lyndon's unconscious and bloody body and Terry's disfigured face. He was also not moving now, having passed out from the pain. I started putting out the fire as Charcoals slumbered back into the forest.
Send your true encounters to storiesforaries@gmail.com, and I might just read it in one of my next videos. Thanks for stopping by, and as always, thanks for listening. My name is Akravi, and I'm a 49-year-old woman living in Greece. For years, I have been hiding a story, which is the only abnormal or maybe paranormal thing that happened in my life. The incident took place in the late spring of 1990, and back then, I shared with the authorities the parts that could be helpful to them. Nothing ever came of their investigation, and now, decades later, I decided to tell the full story. Seeing how easily people share their experiences online, it gave me the courage to tell mine. I'm not sure what really happened that night, but I need to get it off my chest. I was 19 at the time, and I was the first person to visit my grandparents' house since my grandmother died 5 years before. The house, up in the mountains of Greece, remained empty until my parents decided to spend their summer there. I offered to visit, to clean up, and to report the state that it was in. I wasn't thinking only of them, though. I wanted to try out nudism, and the isolated mountain house was ideal. It was 2 kilometers of rough country road away from the closest village. There were 2 other houses around belonging to relatives, but they were just as abandoned. I found the house in a good state, but the vegetation around had grown wild. This was great for me because it decreased the already slim chance of someone seeing me naked. I spent the first day cleaning the house, and it was a lot of work. After a shower, I fell asleep until around 3 a.m., when a violent shake of the bed woke me up. It felt like a single blow of an earthquake coming from the left of the house. I turned on the light and looked at the light fixture that hangs off the ceiling to see if it was oscillating, but it wasn't. I brushed it off and I went back to sleep. I relaxed the following day. The house had no landline, but it had electricity. I opened the old black and white TV set and lay naked, inside on the bed or outside under the shade, on a wooden lounge chair. I fell asleep early with the TV set open. Then, past 3 a.m., the shake woke me up again. The light in the room was on as I left it, and the television was still playing. I was spooked that it happened 2 nights in a row at nearly the same time. Maybe my sleeping cycle got screwed up for some reason and I'm just waking up at this hour, I thought, trying to rationalize it as I got up to close the TV. As the sound from the program playing died down, I heard voices talking from outside the house and from a distance. Again, they came to the left of my house. The area there is so quiet that the wind can make voices or music sound a lot closer than they are. Apart from that, I was too disturbed from the repeating shakes that I preferred not to go out exploring in the middle of the night. When I stopped hearing them after a few minutes, I went back to sleep. I woke up again at around 8 a.m. After making coffee, I sat outside in the clean morning air, pondering about the shakes. It annoyed me that they came at the same time every night. Old memories of my grandmother came back. Here I was, sitting naked in her house on a hedonistic trip, and it was the first time that I had thought of her. I felt bad about myself since she was such a kind woman, and I hadn't even taken a moment to honor her memory. We used to take long walks around the area, and she would tell me about its history. Supposedly, the location was dimmed of bad luck, and people outside our family chose not to build there. I didn't believe in the paranormal, but the thought of a curse made me shiver. What would really terrify me, though, was if I was becoming mentally ill. But I was feeling great and behaved as usual, and apart from the shakes waking me up, I slept fine. Sometimes I have lucid dreams, but most of them are enjoyable or meaningless. Anyway, I decided that since all of the shakes came from the left of the house, I would explore that side. I already knew what was there. The house was on the less steep side of the hill. To the side was 300 meters of dense forest, and then a big rock cliff looking down to a 100 square meter field accessible from the country road. There used to be a path through the forest to the rock cliff from my house, and since it was a closer distance than the country road, I decided to try the path. I covered myself in thick jean trousers, an old military jacket my dad had left, and I took a small axe from the shed. It came in handy since I had to hack my way through the path. Even when I reached the rock cliff about an hour later, sweating and swearing, I looked back and the path was barely visible despite my hacking. On the rock cliff itself, I saw no sign of human activity. No fire, no debris, nothing. But when I went to the edge of the rock cliff and stared down, I saw 2 young, tall men. They were pale and blonde, looking North European. Surprised, I pulled back and fell on the ground. They had cleared a circle in one side of the field with a fire pit in the middle. They had also cleared just enough to fit their tent. The 2 men were talking, and after a while, they undressed and sat naked under the morning sun for a while before going inside their tent. The hedonist young female spirit inside me was excited to have young men around me. Maybe they were Euro travelers, and we could spend some time together. But I couldn't fight the feeling that there was something wrong. Why did they go to sleep in the morning? What were they doing all night? It wasn't like there were nightclubs around here. I was unsure of what to do. I didn't want to face the 2 men alone. The closest telephone was a few hours' walk, and even if I called the police, what would they say? The field they had camped in belonged to my family, so they were trespassing, but it was unlikely that the police would immediately travel many dozens of kilometers from their station for such a complaint. I decided that the safest thing to do was to go back home and return late at night to spy on them from the top of the hill. So that's what I did. 1 hour before the sun went down, I left my house, moving silently through the woods, and I reached the cliff. The night that came was moonless and dark. In its cover, I went to the side of the cliff and looked down. I saw a fire blazing at the center of the circle. The circle was also ornate with symbols. Maybe they were runes, but don't quote me on this. I couldn't see the men anywhere, and that gave me the creeps as I feared they would sneak up on me from behind. Then I finally saw them, moving from their tent to the circle. Their appearance made me shudder. They both wore black robes with symbols on them. They also dragged with them a wild hog that had its legs and mouth tied. I realized that these people were occultists and that they would perform a ritual that contained a sacrifice. I felt the presence of evil, and cold sweat ran down my back, but at the same time, I was in disbelief. This can't be happening. This only happens in the movies, I thought, as the 2 men stood facing one another on opposite sides of the circle. The tied pig was beside one of them, jerking its head, trying to free itself. They started chanting in some language that sounded like German. They went on for many hours during that time, and nothing happened. Their chanting became slower, but it was always constant and persistent. I laid face down and continued watching. Initially, my heart was racing, but as hours went by and nothing happened, I became bored and sleepy. This was when I must have fallen asleep. I was awoken by the gut-wrenching squeals of the hog. I had expected a sacrifice, but I couldn't imagine the brutality I witnessed. Seeing the helpless animal treated like that made me want to scream, but the fear of my life prevented me, along with the sensation of wanting to puke. I didn't want to watch anymore, and I pulled back, closing my eyes and ears, while trying not to faint from the feeling of sickness in my stomach. Then it happened again, the shaking. This time I was sure I was awake. The chanting had stopped, but I could hear below German speaking and laughing. I knew that looking could be a mistake, but my curiosity was stronger. With my body aching from sleeping on the hard ground, I crawled back to the edge of the cliff and looked down. The 2 men were standing next to each other. From the pit, in the middle of the circle, an orange-blue column of fire spiraled high, and the smoke that reached me had a sweet metallic taste. Before the men, a being attempted to stand up under the excited gaze of the occultists. It was taller than them. I could see the creature's back, and it had the elongated body of a wild hog with legs and hands that were grotesque copies of human limbs. As the beast grew steady at its feet, it left a groan that froze my blood and scared even the occultists. One of them raised his hand and gave a command that the beast seemed to accept, and stepped back. The two men looked at each other pleased, but the creature moved forward again, giving an angry scream. Everything happened fast after that. The same occultist as before raised his hand and commanded, "Nothing." The beast bit him on the neck, between the head and the shoulder, in a matter of seconds. His body became loose and fell to the ground when the monster's mouth opened. I saw its head turned, face towards the other occultist. I didn't want to witness this. I got up with difficulty. Some of my body felt frozen stiff, while my legs were like jello. I walked, sometimes crawled, through the forest towards my house, crying and covering my ears from the man screaming. When I reached my home, it was past 4 a.m. I locked myself in and didn't open the door until noon. Everything was calm by then. It was the most peaceful day you had ever known. It all seemed like a bad nightmare, and I wanted to believe that it was. I forced myself to walk to the country road to the field where the occultist camped. The tent was there with some of the clothes. The circle was there with the burned-out fire and some surviving symbols. The men were nowhere to be found, and no sign of the creature. I went back home, and after preparing a backpack of water and food, I walked for an hour to the closest village to call the police. I told them that 2 Germans were camping illegally on my parents' land and were lighting fires. I waited for the police in the village with their vehicle, and we drove to the field. Their search had the same results as mine: the circle with the fire pit and the symbols, the men's belongings, and no remains from humans. They left the tent and the men's belongings for a few days, and since the men didn't appear to take them from the field, the police loaded everything in one of their cars and hauled it away. Everyone in the village was puzzled, since they hadn't seen the men before or after the incident. As you can assume, I picked up and I headed back home. In the summer, when my parents were vacationing there, the police came back and asked for me. They wanted to talk to me about the incident. They called me to my parents' house in the city of Preveza. They had found a car stolen from Athens mid-spring by 2 young men. The car was found parked on a private road 500 meters away from the field, and it was covered with branches. They wanted to know if I had seen that car when the men were trespassing. I hadn't, and after telling them, I asked if they had found the men or what they were doing on the field. They didn't want to say, but when I asked the officer if they thought it may have to do with witchcraft, he laughed out loud, not accepting my idea of the circle and the rocks forming the rune symbols. He closed the conversation, but not before chuckling with my ideas and saying, "What are you smoking?" indicating his belief that I was doing drugs. I was ashamed, but also relieved that I didn't have to come out with the full story to them. If I had, I would surely be labeled as crazy. 30 years later, I have since got married and had kids of my own. By necessity and during family holidays, I have spent time in that field. It was all normal, and there was never talk from the locals of a hog creature running loose or anything weird. Apart from me, no one ever remembers the case of the 2 young trespassers. It was a nightmare that came and left. I can swear that what I wrote above is true and happened, but knowing how the mind can play tricks, I can accept that the latter part of the story was a dream that my mind created after witnessing the torture of the animal. But it didn't feel like a dream. It was my turn to take my kids trick-or-treating. The previous year, it was my wife's, and we trade back and forth every year. My son and daughter were aged 7 and 9. Usually, I stay on the street while my kids go up to different houses to collect candy. About half an hour of walking around, we came to one of the more popular hotspots for candy collecting, a main street in the neighborhood with lots of really cool decorations and animatronics on people's lawns. I became a bit distracted and stopped watching my kids closely. At one point, they came back from a house accompanied by another girl, about the same height as my daughter. She was wearing a weird homemade mask, like a cardboard cutout or something. My daughter asked if she could trick-or-treat with us, so I said sure, and we carried on together as a group. I didn't know who this girl was, but I figured she was a friend from school. As we continued, I started to notice a large man trailing us. He was wearing some sort of angry cat mask. It was kind of creepy, to be honest. I thought that maybe he was the father of the girl, so I tried to start up some small chat with him. I said something like, "Nice weather, eh?" But he didn't respond. He just stood there staring at me, while our kids went up to the stairs to the next house. I tried again, asking, "Hey, is that your daughter?" He nodded, but didn't say anything. I figured he just wasn't in the mood for chatting, so I stopped trying. We carried on for another 15 minutes, until suddenly my kids came up to me and said they wanted to go home. This surprised me as we hadn't been out for too long, and their bags were only about a third full. In any case, I agreed, waved goodbye to the man in the cat mask and his daughter, and started on our way home. The weird thing is that when I glanced back, the man and his daughter were just standing there, staring at us. I checked one more time as we turned the corner, and they were still standing there, not having moved at all. At this point, I decided to ask my kids, "So who was that girl?" My daughter looked up at me with a confused look on her face. "She's your friend," my daughter replied. I asked her what she meant. Apparently, the girl with the cardboard mask approached them and said she was a friend of mine. She told my daughter she was too shy to ask me if she could join to trick-or-treat, and wanted my daughter to ask me instead. I laughed at this story and replied to my daughter, "Why would you think she's my friend? I don't have any children friends." What my daughter said next chilled my bones. According to her, when the girl with the cardboard mask approached them for the first time, she wasn't wearing the mask, so they were able to see her face. As it turns out, she wasn't a girl at all, but an older woman around my age with wrinkles on her face. What's even more disturbing, the older woman had started to steal treats from my daughter's bag, apparently when I wasn't looking. This is why they asked me to go home. The old woman was creeping them out and they just wanted to get away from her. I brought my kids home and told my wife what happened. We made sure to check through all their candy and didn't find anything suspicious or off. We didn't call the police or anything, since nothing really happened. But thinking back, I kind of regret that decision now. What the heck was that old woman doing, and who the hell was that man following us around? I don't think I'll ever know. I just think it's sick that there are people out there on Halloween, hiding behind masks, pretending to be children. This happened in October of 2010, and the reason I can accurately remember that is because this event took place when we were on our way to watch the premiere of Paranormal Activity 2. I was 16 at the time, and although my suburb is rather large and located within close proximity to a big city, there wasn't much to do as a teenager outside of smoking a little weed, driving around and listening to music, or in this case, going to a movie. So 3 of my friends, including my brother and sister, all piled into my sister's beat-up Buick, with the plan of smoking a couple of bowls and heading to the movie. I don't in any way mean to glorify smoking, but I do feel like it's necessary to include to lend to the idea of paranoia that is possible inside the car of a bunch of weed-smoking teenagers. Although, in those types of situations, you're usually paranoid of the police giving you a ticket, or of your parents calling and figuring out what you're up to. This was a bit beyond that, you could say. The residential neighborhoods in my area are essentially maze-like. They all connect, and if you know where you're going, you can drive around the entire town for hours without ever so much as crossing over a main road, which served us perfectly. Our aim was to drive around a while, and once we were ready, we would head to the movie. It was a midnight premiere, so it was dark, and throughout the whole drive, we didn't see another car on the road. We had just decided to head to the theater when we came around a corner to a part of the road where you could visibly see about a quarter mile in front of you with no obstruction, and right in the middle of the street, about 100 feet in front of us, was a woman, standing with her back turned to us. The woman was standing directly under a streetlight, dressed in a white robe, which in the light genuinely made it look like a hospital gown. She didn't move. She didn't react to our headlights, to the sound of our approach. She just stood still, looking straight ahead, in the middle of the road. From our best guess, we figured her to be in her 60s or 70s, just based on her stringy white hair and general physique. We all just stared at her. No one spoke. No one did anything, including the woman in the street. For 15 seconds or so, we were all still, waiting to see if the obvious presence of a vehicle behind her would make her do anything at all. But it didn't. She just stood there, back turned to us, staring right in front of her, with nothing but empty street looking back. I cannot exaggerate how straight out of a horror film this situation was. She looked like Patient Zero from a zombie movie. So as smart people do who don't want to be murdered by some spooky Halloween witch, we turned around right there in the middle of the street and noped out of it. It spooked us so much that we all decided to just skip the movie, so we dropped off our friends and just went home. She looked so scary, so entirely out of place that I wholeheartedly believe most people would have had the same reaction that we did. I'm just glad that she didn't turn around. About a year ago, I got an Alaskan Malamute puppy. I was so excited to have a dog, I wanted to go hiking with him, camping, and traveling. It was fall in Iowa, so it can get pretty cold for camping, so I decided to start researching cabin rentals. I had found an amazing cabin in Wisconsin on Airbnb. It was fully loaded, very secluded in the middle of the woods, had a hot tub, internet, pool table, and a great kitchen. This cabin was so beautiful and it was pretty cheap to rent. The first time I had visited this cabin, it was great. It was just me and my dog. I relaxed, we went hiking, I cooked a great dinner, and I slept pretty well. I only stayed one night, it was just a quick getaway on my day off from work. After getting home, I told my friend Martha about this great cabin. She was eager and wanted to take a trip with me, so we decided to go up the night before Halloween. We took off, just Martha, my dog, and myself. That night we had a blast. We drank, cooked dinner, chilled in the hot tub, and then decided to watch scary movies since it was so close to Halloween. Now, I was pretty drunk, but when I was standing in the kitchen, I could have sworn I saw Martha run down the basement stairs, which were right off from the kitchen where I was standing. But when I looked over into the living room, Martha was sitting on the couch, still watching the movie. I was so freaked out, but again, I was drunk, so I kind of blew it off. We both ended up passing out pretty late and nothing too exciting happened. But what happened the next morning is what made me a solid believer in the paranormal. I was always sort of a skeptic when it came to ghosts. I had some experiences that were weird, but I could always somehow justify it as something else, so I always had that doubt in the back of my mind. But that morning, we were pretty hungover. We ate a little breakfast and then decided to go sit in the hot tub, so I decided to lock my dog in his crate and we went outside to get in the tub. It was really magical because it was literally Halloween and it was dumping down snow. We sat in the hot tub for maybe 15 minutes, but then we heard a big bang inside the cabin and my dog barking at something. We got out of the tub and ran inside and literally froze in our footsteps. The entire kitchen was torn apart. All the cabinets were open, The refrigerator door and top freezer door were open. The bar chairs were all flipped onto their backs. Drawers were open and pans were thrown off shelves. Martha's phone was charging on the counter and it was now unplugged and on the floor. I have no other explanation than paranormal. My dog looked terrified, but there was no way that he tore up the kitchen. He was still a puppy, so he wasn't that big, and he was also still locked in his crate. The kitchen was trashed. I know Martha didn't do it because we were both outside at the same time. There was also no way that someone broke into the cabin. We were in the middle of nowhere and it was snowing, so there would have been footsteps. The hot tub is also right next to the long driveway leading to the cabin, so we would have seen somebody drive up for sure. I just have no other explanation on what happened, so now I'm a believer and so is Martha. We left pretty soon after this happened, and believe it or not, I actually stayed in the cabin again, but nothing ever happened. Maybe Halloween stirred up the spirits and they just wanted to be heard or seen in some way, and maybe I really did see a ghost the night before as well. I am a teacher, and over the summer I nanny for a family. They have a 1-year-old, and I have known his parents for about 5 to 6 years. Every weekday morning during the summertime, I arrive at their home, somewhere between 8 and 8:30. On Thursdays, his dad, Ben, has a booth selling flowers at a local farmer's market. This past Thursday, yesterday at the time of this post, I was on my way to nanny. I turned onto the side road that eventually leads to the family's home, and I saw what I thought was Ben, the kid's father. He was driving the opposite direction towards me, in the same black Nissan he normally takes to the market, and it was very clear to me it was him as he passed by going the other direction, presumably headed towards the market. I giggled to myself and wondered if he had left early, since it was only about 8:20 a.m., and he doesn't normally leave until 9 a.m. I had an internal monologue about how funny it would be to tell his wife I had just passed him, and planned on asking if he had to leave early for that day for some reason. I know this man well, have seen him and his car many times, and I was sure it was him. However, when I arrived to their home about 3 to 5 minutes after, I was in shock to see his car there. I was even more in shock when I walked in to find him in the kitchen prepping breakfast with his son. I swear I had just seen him. I told him and his wife about this, and they agreed it was weird, especially considering the rurality of the area and the lack of anyone locally matching Ben's description or their car. This experience begins with me and my now fiancé going to see some local boxing fights about an hour away in the town over from where we live. We get there, the event finishes up, and then it's nighttime when we're leaving, about 9:30 p.m. As usual, there was a lot of traffic, and we got caught up on a detour through a part of the town that we weren't familiar with, but luckily ended up in the area we were familiar with. As I mentioned before, this town is an hour away from ours, and has a lot more stores and things to do than our rural town, so we visit quite often. When we left, we made sure to stop and fill up our gas tank, and headed out on the freeway back home. This is where things start happening, that neither one of us can explain. So we were driving for about 15 minutes, and all was well, until our music turns off on the radio. We didn't think much of it because the radio was not the best. So we continued driving as normal, but we both are just kind of quiet. Out of nowhere, I start noticing that it seems like we're driving on the same piece of road over and over. This is weird because we know the road and the surrounding areas like the back of our hand, so we know when there's turns coming up and exits passing by. There were also no other cars driving by, which is unusual since it's a freeway and it's always quite busy. At the same time, I start to notice that the gas meter is dropping super fast. While watching, it's just dropping quarter tank by quarter tank, until the gas light came on 5 minutes in and the gas tank was empty. Time is also going by super fast, which was worrying to me as well. Based on the clock, it's been almost an hour since we hit the freeway, but we both stayed quiet. Finally, the radio comes back on and we're able to see the lights from the gas station that's placed right between two towns. As I start to put the gas, it was still empty, no cars in sight, and I was getting this really eerie feeling that something didn't seem right. So we finish up and I tell her we need to get home fast because it felt scary. We finally made it, but the weird thing was that it was 12:30 a.m. when we got home, and we hit the freeway at 10 p.m. So it took us 2.5 hours to get home on a usual, sometimes 45-minute drive. To this day, we can't explain what happened, and I later found out that she noticed all the weird stuff happening, but that we both wanted to stay quiet so we didn't scare each other. On Wednesday of this week, I was outside around 7:30 p.m., watering our plants around the house. On my way out, I set my phone and my drink on the patio table and make my rounds. When all the plants had been watered, I grabbed my phone and drink and sat in my patio chair. I opened my drink and grabbed my phone to browse, but it was dead. I had a small bit of panic over my dead phone that left me feeling guilty. It was too hot to stay out. I grabbed my phone and headed inside. As I bent over to turn off the fan, in my head I thought, why did I just feel panic? This is stupid. I'm going inside to get my charger just to stare at my phone some more. I opened the sliding glass door to see my husband laying on the couch. He saw me holding my phone and drink. I turned around and asked him if he wanted my drink as I had changed my mind. He said maybe and put it in the fridge. I walked to the fridge and sat the can on the shelf, grabbed a kombucha and took a sip. When I turned around, I realized dinner needed to be put away. I walked to the bathroom right next to the kitchen, and I recall not having my phone. I didn't set it down when I was washing my hands. I started organizing the fridge and putting the food away when I thought I should put my phone on the charger, so it's charging as I do this. Then it happened. Wait, where is my phone? In my back pocket? No? Did I put it in the fridge? The search ensued. I looked in every area I had been since entering the house 10 minutes ago. I searched high and low, and when I asked my husband to help, his response was, "Didn't you just have it?" I said yes, and I wouldn't ask you if I wasn't completely dumbfounded. I am good at sounds. If I dropped it, I know what my phone sounds like hitting the ground, and I would have noted that. We searched everywhere. Searched the trash, recycling, fridge, freezer, cabinets, bathroom, and living room. Could the baby have moved it? No, she was sleeping in her crib. I went out to water after she was put to bed. When I say everywhere, like every crevice outside and in and then some. I am losing my mind. It was late and I thought I'd keep looking tomorrow with fresh eyes. Come Thursday, throughout the day, I continued to look and organize every inch of our home. When my husband got home, he looked again and nothing. Friday, same thing. I never left the house. It's now Saturday morning and nothing. My phone has just vanished and I have no idea. It was in my hand. I don't recall setting it down or it not being in my hand. I just can't explain it. This happened over 20 years ago, so the details of which station have been lost to memory. I used to get the train to York, near where I grew up, from Exeter, where I went to university. Sometimes the most direct route was not possible due to the train line being washed away by floods, and I would go via London. On one occasion, even my normal route through London on the tube was disrupted, and I had to take different lines between Paddington, or Waterloo on a really bad day, and King's Cross. This was a very wet and miserable day. At this particular station, I had to change tube lines, and not being familiar with the area, I couldn't work out how to get from where I was on one platform level to the one I wanted, so I decided to exit the station completely, then re-enter, hoping to pick up the signs for where I wanted to go. On exiting the station, I found myself on an empty street. In warm weather, the sky a yellowish-orange color, similar to how I've seen North African cities appear on TV. One or two old cars on the street, but no other person. I remember being the only person climbing the stairs to leave the station, which had been busy. I remember thinking it was a bit odd. I re-entered the station as I intended, found the platform I wanted, got to King's Cross and on my northbound train to York, proceeded out of the station and into the dank, miserable weather that I'd had all morning. I've often thought about that day, and every so often look at a tube map on Google Maps to try to remember which station that this happened at, but I can't remember or work it out. I'm sitting on the couch with both my kids. My husband went into the bathroom that's in our master bedroom about 5 minutes prior. He comes out of the bedroom and walks into the laundry room. The way our floor plan is set up is where I can see into our bedroom from the couch, but I can't see around the corner to the second bedroom or laundry room. After a few minutes, he is still in the laundry room. I get up and go towards my daughter's room to grab her a book. I turn the corner and the laundry room is vacant with the doors closed and the lights off. Weird. I turn my head towards the bedroom and can see the bathroom door shut and the light on. I walk into the bedroom and call for my husband and he answers. He said he's been in the bathroom the entire time and didn't come out at all. I swear to you I watched him walk right out of the bedroom and go towards the laundry room. He searched the whole house. No one else is in the house with us. I was calling my grandmother from my mobile phone on her landline. I was in a place with poor mobile connection. My grandfather, who passed away around 14 years before, answered the phone. It was the same voice, in the same way he used to answer the phone when he was alive. I froze for a moment, then I said, "Oh, sorry, maybe I called the wrong number." Then I hung up. I checked my dialed numbers, but it was the same right number that I've already had saved in my phone. I didn't even type a number to call it. I just picked her name from the contacts and called. Then I recalled her again, just by clicking on her name from the last call, where my dead grandfather answered, and my grandmother answered normally. It was last summer, my girlfriend, now wife, and I finally made the big decision to move in together. Cobblestone Square is a situation of apartment complexes surrounding a center park. After living in another apartment for 2 years, I learned a bigger apartment was opening up on the other side of the complex. We needed bigger space because my wife had 2 children from a previous marriage. After a rushed inspection, we were happy to move in as June started. The months passed and the days grew shorter and colder. Autumn was drawing close, and with it, that's when the trouble began. In all the stories and movies, it starts out small. Things moving from place to place, lights being left on, etc. All chalked up to forgetfulness. This was true in our case, and we didn't think much of it. It only started to escalate with the children. Our apartment is set up with 2 bedrooms and baths on the opposite end of each other. In our bedroom, we have our own private bathroom, and next to the kids' room is a small hallway leading to their own bathroom. We would give them baths here and potty train, and almost as if flicking a switch, when the autumn months came, our youngest, a 2-year-old girl, would absolutely hate going into the bathroom. At the mere mention of bath time, she would go into hysterics. Or, on good days, she would sit in the bath, and in the process of bathing, she would look past myself and my wife and start screaming and crying. Oftentimes, something would catch her eye in the mirror, and she would also start crying like mad. The most unsettling part would be that as soon as we took her out of the bathroom, she would stop and act like nothing happened. Our son, who was 4 at the time, also would run up to us and say that he would hear a voice saying "uppy," which is a common saying among the children when they wanted to be held. We asked if it was his sister, and he would profusely say it wasn't her, but he did say it sounded like a kid. This happened a few times. With my wife being separated from her first husband and splitting custody, we would have the children come live with us every other week. On the weeks that the children would go stay with their dad, the activity would seem to die down, but that didn't mean it wouldn't happen. I asked my wife if she remembered anything from last year, and she recounted a time when we didn't have the children and she was cleaning the house. She noticed the kids' door was open, we usually keep it closed, but thought that maybe I went into the room for something. It wasn't until a while later that she used the kids' bathroom and saw that the door was open again. She found me in our room and asked if I opened it, and I said I didn't. With more incidents of lights being found on and doors opening, it all came to a head near the end of October when I was washing dishes in the kitchen. Above the sink facing the living room is a small window that allows someone in the kitchen to look out into the dining room and living room, and additionally the back door. After the kids had been put to sleep, my wife and I set about our nightly duties of chores to finish up before the next day started. As I was washing dishes, I looked up from the sink and saw in the glass of the back door a reflection of a large shadow in the hallway to the kids' bathroom. It quickly entered the bathroom, and I immediately walked over, turning on the light, and saw nothing there. I went to my bedroom where my wife was vacuuming, and I asked her if she by chance went into the kids' bathroom. I wasn't surprised by her response when she said no, and I told her what I saw. It was after this event, and subsequently Halloween, that all the activity seemed to stop. Months passed by again, and now we jump to 2020, August. As soon as the activity started again, I kept a journal of all of the findings. That way there was a record. On August 10th, I went to go to the bathroom in the kids' bathroom before going to bed and heard a small child giggle. Both children were fast asleep. August 11th, my wife was bathing our daughter, and in the first time in a year, our little girl started to shriek in fear until she was out of the bathroom. August 13th, while getting ready for bed, our son knocked on the door. I'm always the one to answer, and he told me that he was afraid. He wouldn't elaborate on what it was, but begged for the closet to be closed. The closet has never been a problem, and a few nights after this, we returned it to being open and haven't experienced anything like it again. August 15th, my wife and I had an argument, and I went to sleep on the couch for the night. As I was tossing and turning, I heard a child's voice in the night, "Uh-huh," as if answering a question. I forced myself to go to sleep. Both myself and my wife have caught our son speaking to himself. My wife told me that once she heard him saying, "Ow, stop it, you're hurting me." And when she went to go check on him, he was in the hallway by the kids' bathroom, holding his arm. During the daytime, the kids were playing and both me and my wife were doing our own thing. As I was sitting on the couch, our son runs behind it, stops, and then says, "And how would you do that?" Out of the blue. I turn to him and ask him who he's talking to, and after a moment's hesitation, he says, "Nobody." I told him I heard him say something, and he insisted that he didn't say anything. One occasion, my wife was sleeping on the couch, and in the middle of the night, she heard a man's whisper, "Don't get up," to which she promptly obeyed. It was the night after that I woke up from my sleep in the bed to see a shadow shape standing over me with red eyes. I felt as if it was going to hurt me. My wife and I have naturally begun our interest in the spiritual world. We began researching and looking for ways to go about this. We've purchased a Ouija board with no results, and from a medium, a supposedly haunted ring. If our apartment was going to be haunted, we wanted to know by who and with what intentions. It seems as if our mail order ghost has already made their home, as one morning our front door was unlocked and slightly ajar, nothing stolen. Tonight, as I write this, my wife and I were watching TV on the couch and decided to call it a night. As we went to our bedroom, I noticed a low scratching sound coming from the record player. I opened it up and saw that the turntable was moving as the needle was off its holder, turning the record player on. I replaced the needle and tried knocking the player a few times to see if it could have been easily bumped and knocked off, but no. The only way to move the needle was to pick it up with your fingers and set it down. I was reminded of one other time that this happened, long before we bought any haunted items. September 4th, after coming home from work, I noticed that the bathroom door was open, after we left it closed all day, and I even asked my wife if she went in there, and of course, she said no. At night, before bed, my wife stood in the doorway of our bedroom, staring with eyes wide open. I asked her what the problem was, and she said that she heard someone slapping their palm against the sliding glass door. We investigated and found nothing. September 6th. My wife and I have a small collection of swords that we keep safely in our room. A few are propped up against the wall, being that we had no space. At 7:38 a.m., I woke up to a crashing noise, noticing that the swords propped up had fallen over. It could easily be dismissed as a slippery surface, but we had them in a way where they were firmly against the wall and have never fallen over before. September 7th, Labor Day. No surprise that this is the day we get the kids back, and immediately the activity becomes more rampant. With the day cold and rainy, we spent the holiday indoors and nothing to do but watch TV and eat. As we're doing this, I hear a thud come from the bedroom. Looking in, I see that a Toy Story Woody doll is on the ground. I received it for Christmas from my in-laws and put it on top of the bookshelf next to Buzz. Never has this fallen over, or at the very least, was unsteady. My wife mentioned how I left out another event from this last year that happened to her. She was quick to remind me that once when she was in the bathroom putting on makeup, she saw a face behind the door, almost as if peeking in. She turned and saw nothing. My sister-in-law is an employee at Best Buy and gave us the courtesy of purchasing a security cam for us. All updates will be posted. September 13th. With the installation of the camera, it seems that things have died down, which brings us a sigh of relief. We talked with our son, who's 5, and he told us that sometimes in his room, he feels as if someone is watching him, and not only that, but someone speaks to him. He told me that it sounded like a little boy whispering in his ear when he's laying in bed after we say goodnight. He says the voice says, "Time to go to sleep," every time that it speaks. I asked if he felt like it was going to hurt him, and he said no. This morning, as I typed this, he came rushing to the room and said he heard it again. It was the night before that I set up a microphone to record in the night. I've looked back on the recording and my findings are inconclusive. The children have a white noise machine going on in their room all night, which my son said is where he hears the voice coming from. I've checked the audio closely, and even at hours where the children are definitely asleep, it still sounds like there are full-on conversations happening between people. As of now, I can't make out anything they're saying, and as I understand, white noise machines are meant to mask peak noises, such as conversations from another room. It requires more attention to understand what's going on, but at least my son saying that he hears a little boy confirms my theory of having a ghost child in the home, whom I've heard twice. The week of the 13th through the 19th of September proved to be fruitless in our attempts at capturing any more audio or video. That was the week that we didn't have the children. We switched with their father on Sunday evenings. That being said, the past week of the 20th through the 26th proved to be quite different. The night of the 21st was eventful. We captured a series of events on the camera in the kids' room, and I'll list the timestamps. 8:18 p.m. My wife enters the room with our son to put him to bed. Absolute darkness. Not that the room is dark, but the screen is dark, and there is absolutely no audio. In between these times, my wife comes into our bedroom where I'm on the bed, getting ready to sleep, and she tells me that she heard the kids' door open while she was in the kids' bathroom cleaning. A voice whispered and said, "Mom?" She whispered back, "What?" and felt the clear presence of somebody standing behind her. She turned around and saw nothing. 8:22 p.m. The camera captures our son getting out of bed and leaving the room, where he tells us that he was having a bad dream. September 23rd, 3:14 a.m. Both the microphone setup and the camera capture our son getting up in bed and saying, "That's mine. No, that's mine." September 25th. This night was a big night. I would usually start the recording on the laptop and microphone after the children were fast asleep, but I was so tired myself that I fell asleep early before I had the chance to. The next morning, I noticed the door to the kids' room was open by a large margin. We have ingrained the idea of shutting doors into both kids' head, and even checking the camera footage, our son does take the time to close the door after leaving the room. He didn't get up again for the night. My wife stayed up later than myself and confirmed that the door was indeed shut. 1:25 a.m. Our son wakes up and notices either the door opening or the door being open, and promptly throws the covers over his face and goes back to sleep. September 26th, 5:20 a.m. A small tap is heard on our bedroom door. I figured it was our son, so I got up and opened the door, but nobody was there. 6:06 a.m. Our son comes to our door saying that he heard a voice saying, "Hey." I checked the mic, and indeed, before our son wakes up, there is the slightest whisper of "hey," and then our son begins to stir as if he's scared in his sleep and wakes up entirely. 8:59 a.m. While going over the recordings in the kids' bedroom, a few books on the bookshelf fell over. October 7th. It's been a while since I've come back and posted on this, and that's because the activity that's been happening has been nothing more than the expected phantom knocking. Nothing extreme, until last night. We bought for our kids 2 small pumpkins to paint, and we set them on the table out of the way, but this morning both pumpkins were off the table sitting on the floor. One was in the living room and one was in the hallway by the kids' room. October 8th. This morning, my wife said when she was getting ready in the bathroom, she heard what sounded like whispers coming from the bedroom. She looked out, expecting to see the kids, but nobody. Out of the whispers, she could make out, "There she is." I asked what it sounded like, and she said, "Like a little kid. That's why I thought it was ours." On the night of October 8th, we got in the mail a ghost sweeper, a device that sweeps through radio waves and can pick up EVPs. I was excited to use it when it charged, so after the kids were asleep and my wife was in our bedroom, I sat in the living room and held our mail-order ghost, Gloria, who was attached to the ring. Now to note, every time I hold this ring, I get a headache, and last night was no different. I turned on the sweeper and simply said, "Hello?" while holding Gloria. I cannot confirm what I heard, but I heard what sounded like a woman's voice say, "Hello?" back to me. I quickly asked more questions, but nothing more was heard. I decided to put Gloria on. She fits only on one finger, my left pinky, and then I went to bed. I usually fall asleep on my back and stay that way. Once in a while, I'll turn on my side, but last night I couldn't get to sleep until I rolled onto my left side, the same side Gloria was on. Anytime I laid on my back or turned right, I would wake up until I returned to the left side. It was interesting. I am thoroughly convinced my apartment is haunted. People die in them way too often to think it's not a possibility. And if nobody died here, the cemetery across the road definitely doesn't bring me any comfort. As I write this, I can say that two distinct entities can somewhat be accounted for. A small child ghost and something else. Or maybe something that wants to be viewed as a child. We still live here to this day, and autumn is just beginning. That's when things seem to really get interesting around here. My husband and I went camping for the first time ever in Arizona as part of our long trip out west. I had picked out this really cool place that was on a mountain overlooking a beautiful landscape. It's next to a cliff and in a really isolated location. I'm talking like 20 miles out on gravel roads in the middle of a national forest. So we get there and set up our tent and hike a little bit and take pictures of the surrounding area. We see a few cars parked around two tents and decide to stop and talk to the other campers nearby, because we had heard that there was going to be a bad storm that night. These were 4 guys who were from Arizona, and they told us not to worry and that the storm didn't get that terrible around this area. That was all the persuading that we needed to stay. Later on, while walking a bit further down the campsite, we see a woman with her dog and another older lady. We smile and wave and continue to hike down a bit further into the forest. Because of the storm, we are one among maybe a total of 7 campers that decided to stay and withstand the night. We watch the sunset when we get back to our site, make sure our car is only a few yards away, and go into our tent when it gets too dark to see. There are no stars tonight due to the storm clouds, and it hasn't begun to rain yet, so we decide to try to sleep right away so we could possibly sleep through the storm when it does hit. It's an insanely windy night, so it's hard to sleep, but eventually we get a bit of shut-eye. I wake up at 10:30 p.m. to the sound of some crazy thunder rolling through the mountains and the rain hitting down on our tent. I'm a little freaked out because they get a lot of flash floods out here, and I didn't want to fall off the side of the cliff. But I tell myself to try to sleep, and eventually I doze off again. It's 12 a.m. and I awake again. This time because I hear something heavy hitting the side of our tent. It full on sounded like someone could have been punching our tent and sliding something down the side of it. I open my eyes and I can't see anything. It's completely dark, no light whatsoever. The sound continues every couple of minutes. Suddenly, I hear footsteps right next to my side of the tent. They are slow but steady. I seriously start thinking about how this is it, and I'm going to die. My heart is beating so fast that I'm certain that whatever is out there can hear it. Then, whatever it is, lets out a deep sigh right on the opposite side of the tent. I'm thinking it's a bear and realizing that I might actually have to face this thing. So in a desperate call for my husband's mind-reading powers, I squeeze his hand really hard repetitively, and he wakes up. But instead of reading my mind, he blurts out, "What's wrong? Why are you squeezing my hand?" Right as he says this, the footsteps stop. I don't hear the footsteps again. So after a while, I break out of my frozen state and tell him what I heard. We decided it may have been an animal passing by. But whatever is hitting our tent continues every so often, and I'm starting to go a little insane from this night, wondering what's going on. We convince ourselves that it's just pine needles falling from the trees above us, and we try to sleep again. We just need to make it through one night, then we can laugh about this all in the morning. A couple of minutes go by, and suddenly, the tent caves in on my husband's side, right on his head. He whispers that it feels like something is pushing the tent down. I feel my heart instantly sink. I'm freaking out, thinking it's a bear that just sat on his head, but he decides to push back, and we hear the familiar noise of something sliding off of our tent that we've been hearing for the past few hours. We then realize that it's been snowing outside, and that the noise that we heard hitting our tent was heavy ice falling from the trees onto our tent. Our tent is covered in thick ice, and my husband pushes off the tent from the inside until all of the ice slides off. Still determined to make it through the night, and a little relieved that it was just ice and not a bear, we try to sleep and make it to sunrise. We keep on a small light that my husband, luckily, brought with him, just to calm us down a little. Things are starting to seem normal again, and we both close our eyes. It's 3 a.m. at this point, not even 30 minutes after we are settling down, and my literal worst nightmare happens. Out of the pitch black night, we hear a woman screaming. We distinctly hear her say, "What the hell? Oh my God, what the hell?" followed by some other non-tangible words that sound something like, "Help." The way that she screams doesn't sound like anger. It sounds like pure terror and a sense of panic. My husband and I are both frozen, looking at each other. I quickly shut off our light and start panicking and asking what we should do. How is this really happening right now? While we are trying to decide what to do for the next few minutes, we hear her again. But this time she is screaming, "No, no, 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 no," as we hear a car speed off into the night. I'm in tears at this point. We have no idea what's happening. It's dead silent now, save for the icy rain hitting our tent. It definitely sounded like she wasn't in the car, but more like she was desperately yelling after it or begging not to be hurt. And this was the breaking point. Because I could take the bad weather, I could take the possible bear outside my tent, I could even take the ice falling on our heads in one of the warmest states in America. But one thing I cannot and will not ever be able to handle is a screaming person in the middle of pitch black woods at 3 a.m. We decide to get out of there and even contemplate leaving our tent and booking it to our car. But instead, we try to stay level-headed and grab our valuables and put them in the car first. We frantically gather all of our things and stay close as we shuffle to our car. I close the door and keep the lights off for a while, scared to attract any unwelcome visitors. And while my husband goes back to grab the tent, I start the car and call 911. I tell them what I heard and where we are, and they say that they're sending someone to the campsite to make sure everything is okay. Only thing is, we are literally in the middle of nowhere, and it will definitely take them more than an hour to arrive. Not to mention, the storm left those gravel roads in some pretty terrible conditions. So my husband and I decide to start driving. It's like 3:30 a.m. now. As we drive out of the campsite, my husband notices one last eerie detail that stuck with me. The 4 guys that we had talked to earlier had left. All 3 of their cars were gone, while their tents remained. Whatever scared them off, they sure left in a hurry. It was only after we started driving that the thought occurred to me, whatever was walking next to my tent may not have been an animal. It very well could have been someone lurking around in the dark who decided to go after the girl we had previously seen on our hike. I'm not quite sure what went down on that lone mountain that night, and I hope that everyone got out okay. I called the police department back to follow up, and was told that the cops searched the area for a few hours and talked with a few people who were still there, but didn't find anything. I had spent the better part of a week camping in the desert and stopped at the Taco Bell in Kayenta, Arizona on my way back to southern Utah, where I lived at the time. When I sat down, an older man with a limp walked over and asked if he could join me. I felt a little strange about it, but I hadn't spoken to anyone in days and could use some conversation. He opened up to me, told me a little bit about his past on the Navajo reservation, his estranged family, some verses from the Bible, he was a Christian convert, and how a local pastor at a church had been helping him to get back on his feet. I was unsure if he was evangelizing or maybe wanting some cash or something else completely. I'm still unsure, in fact. Then his story turned dark. He started talking about seeing ghosts and how he had been possessed by a demon twice. Maybe he still was. He wanted to show me videos on his phone of one of the spirits in his house. I watched a blurry streak of color that appeared in the middle of the kitchen on his phone, but it looked like there was a filter applied to the video, and it could have just been some sort of reflection or interference. I was unconvinced, but there was a feeling of uneasiness settling into my stomach. The story continued for a while until I told him I had to be headed home, when he asked me for a ride to his house around the block. He had a limp and it took him 20 minutes to walk home in the cold, but it would only be a 3-minute drive. Again, very uneasy, but I said yes. I mean, after hearing his story and the hurt and struggle in his voice, I felt compelled to at least help him in this small way. He expressed a lot of gratitude when I said yes. He directed me down the main road, away from the business strip in Kayenta, toward a very dark block of scattered homes and open desert. The uneasiness turned into dread, and I kept asking him over and over where his house is, and he would just say, "It's right up there." The thought that he may have a weapon crossed my mind as we were heading farther away from traffic, lights, and people around the main strip of town. We entered what looked like a run-down, abandoned subdivision of very small homes with the occasional working streetlight. I didn't see a single sign of occupancy, no lights in the houses, no cars in the driveway, until 2 silhouettes of men seemingly appeared from nowhere and walked across the street in front of me, only to disappear again. I was terrified as I asked him again where his house was. He sensed my uneasiness and assured me it was just around the corner. Sure enough, we turned the corner and there was a little house, same as all the others, with a light on inside. I could let him get out here, he said, and he thanked me and said, "God bless you," and walked to the front door of the house that was supposedly occupied by spirits. It was a bizarre encounter, and I just have this feeling, even now, that I met this man for a reason that I don't understand. I've questioned whether or not the man actually existed, or if I imagined him. In any case, I felt these feelings of unease, dread, sympathy, and anxiety that I have never experienced in the same way. This happened this morning around 1:30 or 2 a.m. in a large park on the edge of a Phoenix, Arizona suburb. I'm not too familiar with skinwalkers, I'll admit. I have heard them by virtue of growing up in the desert, as well as a casual fascination with spooky stories. This morning, I was meeting up with an old friend from high school around 1 a.m. at a nearby park to booze and catch up on life while walking around the field. We heard a loud, repetitive noise coming from the park that I assumed to be a coyote, but it didn't stop. It almost sounded like a soundbite of a child wailing, but choppily and perfectly repeated. The noise had a sort of mechanical element to it, if that makes sense. We would hear it for intervals of about 10 seconds, then it would stop for a few, and then start again. We were both immediately perturbed and headed back for the car to hang out in the parking lot close by. As we walked away toward the car, however, the noise ceased. Unfortunately, when we arrived at the parking lot, my friend realized he had forgotten his phone somewhere in the field where we had heard that strange, loud noise. We drove back and ran to go pick up the phone and found it. But when we entered the park, the noise started again, but this time from a different corner of the park. Naturally, we bolted out of there, and the rest of the night was fine. I was driving one morning. It was a 75-mile drive that I only had to make about once every 2 weeks. The road is 2 lanes on both sides, separated by a large grassy area. The speed limit was 65. I am a person who stops to help people, all of the time. If I see you pushing your car, I stop and ask if you need help. If your battery is dead in the Walmart parking lot, I'll ask if I can help. I was driving to work that morning, and on the other side of the highway, I see a silver Kia Optima headed down the road, when all of a sudden, it looked as if something caused the wheel to jerk hard to the side, making the side walls of the tires catch the asphalt and cause the car to begin rolling, like NASCAR rolling. I remember saying, "Holy shit," out loud, but I just kept driving. I didn't turn around. I don't know why. This really bothered me for 2 years. Why didn't I stop? Well, about 2 years later, I was driving home in my newish used car, a silver Kia Optima. When I overreacted to a dog running across the highway, I tried to remain in control, but I didn't have a chance. I began rolling violently, but peacefully from my point of view. I somehow wound up escaping with only superficial damage to myself. I now think the reason I didn't stop was because I wasn't able to. Like, it would have thrown things off too much. I'm 39, and I can remember 2 instances where time paused. First, I was on a noisy school bus in 5th or 6th grade. I was reading a book and became aware of complete silence. I looked up and around, and everyone was completely still, with absolute silence. The sound of my own heartbeat started to become so loud due to the complete silence of everything else. I looked outside of the bus and we weren't moving. Then it was as if everything outside became hazy or blurry for a split second, and then time, sound and movement, returned to normal, but it took a moment, so there was a brief instance of paused time speeding back up to normal time, if that makes sense. No one else moved on the bus, so I don't think anyone else was aware. The second time I was at work, early 2000s at a medium-sized hardware store. I was working in the back corner and heard someone an aisle over looking through the nuts and bolts drawer. I had a question for my boss, so I spoke over the radio. No answer, so I asked again. Again, no answer. I started walking towards the front registers where the boss would be and realized the only sound was my footsteps and breathing. There's usually music playing, people talking, and clicking of metal tools as people look at them. When I passed the end of the next aisle, the customer that was looking at the nuts and bolts was staring at a bolt in his hand, so I didn't think anything of it and I kept walking. Every aisle I passed, every person was motionless and soundless. The people who had stopped mid-step were the most alarming. My footsteps seemed so loud and my heart started to race. Less than a minute after I hadn't received a reply on the radio, as I rounded the corner to where the registers were, all movement and sound returned to normal in an instant. At the same time, I felt dizzy and had to grip an end cap to stay standing. After my boss finished with a customer, I asked if he had heard me on the radio. Neither he nor my coworkers had heard my 2 attempts to ask a question. I really liked that job in that store, but on a few other occasions, I felt weird sensations in the same area I had been when time stood still. I worked there 5 days a week for over a year after that, and went in every section every single day, so feeling strange only in that one aisle on a few other occasions really stands out to me. Our kitchen looks into our living room. My mom came downstairs from a nap and began pulling stuff out of the fridge for dinner. My aunt was sitting in the living room with her back to the kitchen and she was knitting. The doorbell rang and my mom walked to the front of the house to get it. She opened the door, and there is my aunt, holding grocery bags. My mom just stared at her and tried to process what she was seeing. She then walked back to the kitchen and looked into the empty living room. She has no explanation for it, and neither do I. My brother tells me a few weeks ago he was driving on a pretty busy road in our small town. He was approaching a part in the road that has another road that runs across it with stop signs on each side. It was a 2-way stop. He said as he was approaching, he instantly got the urge to throw up. He didn't feel nauseous or anything, but he knew that he had to stop and throw up instantly. So he stops the car, opens the door, and pukes. And as he's raising up to close the door after he finished, he noticed a large truck run through the stop sign, going 60 to 70 miles per hour. The way he described it, he was driving and everything happened instantly, and something made him stop and throw up to avoid getting hit. Maybe not that creepy to some, but the way he told it gave me chills. He says after he threw up, he didn't feel sick at all. He went home and ate dinner, and absolutely had no symptoms whatsoever. I live in a very small town. We have a small grocery store, hardware store, you know the drill. I was done getting groceries and hopped in my car to head home. As I pulled up to the end of the driveway of the store, blinker on to get to the main road, I see a big white, lifted Chevy pickup driving toward me that I needed to wait for. I watch it as it drives closer to me, remarking to myself that it looks so similar to my husband's, just older and rusted around the edges. It even has the same black emblem and large iron cross bumper. As the truck goes past me, my jaw nearly fell open. Staring at me intently was a man almost identical to my husband, but with a longer, graying beard and gray hair around the ears. I gathered myself and pulled out behind the truck and up to the stop sign that followed. He was still staring at me in his side mirror, glancing away and then staring at me again. He took off at the first chance he got, and I tried to follow to see which direction he took, but a car was coming and I couldn't get out behind him in time. The truck sped away toward my road, but I don't know if he turned in that direction or not. I know that's a little crazy, but I couldn't help feeling that total connection I feel with my husband when I saw his reflection in the side mirror staring at me. It gives me goosebumps to think about, because it was like he knew that it was me and I was the wrong age, and that he needed to get out of there before I could follow. I got home and my husband was there working in his wood shop. I told him about it and he chuckled and asked if he looked hot when he was old. I mean, he did, if it was really him. Years and years ago, when I was young, I used to play video games like any young kid did. It was just my thing. I played every day and had an Xbox 360. I didn't want anyone to know what my real name was, but I made an email for my Xbox Live account. The name on the email I created was under the name of Tom Liza. Not really sure why I named the account that, but it was the first name that came to my head. So I was like, what the heck, I'll just use that. So for years I had this account created with a fake name, Tom Liza. I stopped playing video games and 5 or 6 years go by and I hadn't touched the console or video games in general. I'm out one night with my best friend Will. We've just come back from playing dodgeball at this place that we went to on Friday night for some fun. I was 17 then and just got my license. Like any new driver, most of the time, you don't know where you're going. I was stopped at a red light on Route 347. I whipped out my GPS on my phone and it told me that I needed to get into a turning lane. Stupid me, without looking, turns into the turning lane and sideswiped a 2004 Toyota Corolla. At this point, my heart is pounding through my chest because I'm 17 and I've never been in a car accident, nonetheless driving in general for that long. This guy gets out of the car pissed. Long story short, the police arrive, file a police report, and the night goes on from there. A few days go by and I receive a copy of the accident report. I open the letter and begin to read the report, and I stop. I took a second and third look at the police report. The name of the person I got into an accident with was Tom Liza. This happened 20 years ago and I still can't explain it. I picked up my friend to go out one Saturday evening. I was driving and we were blasting the tunes and laughing, ready for a fun night out. To get to our destination, we needed to hop on the freeway for a quarter of a mile, and then off at the next exit. I turned onto the freeway on-ramp, not realizing it was under construction, like a dummy, not paying attention to the ramp close sign. Suddenly my friend screamed, "Look out!" The road was just gone. We both screamed. In front of us was a great big construction hole. But the next thing either of us remember is being at our destination. There's no way we couldn't have crashed into the hole. We didn't even really talk about it until days later. It was like we both just forgot about it. I drove past the exact spot soon after. It was a giant hole. How are we here, alive, not injured, car not scratched? And what happened to those 5 to 10 minutes between realizing we were going to crash and being at our destination? Last night at about 2 a.m., my dog started barking viciously. I have a German Shepherd. She's my guard dog, so I'm no stranger to aggressive barks. But this was the most intense behavior I had ever seen from her before. Again, I have really never heard her behave like that. I thought about getting a weapon. I was really scared that someone might be at the door. But then I remembered that my cat was outside, so maybe it was just my cat making a fuss. Even if it was an intruder, my dog would kill someone to protect me. I looked through our peephole, but no one was there, so I opened the door. My dog had been barking the whole time. When I opened the door, instead of going out to sniff around like she usually does, she planted herself in front of me and got even louder. She was guarding me. I have never seen anything like that from her. I looked out to see what it could be, and then I saw it. The first thing I noticed were the eyes. It was sort of like when you shine a light on animal eyes, sort of glowing in the nighttime darkness. I then noticed the antlers and thought it must be a deer. But then I realized its face looked about 9 feet above the ground. Then I noticed its body. I could make out the outline and tell that it was fur, but it was standing in a human-like position, hunched over almost, on its hind legs. I have never been so terrified. As soon as I realized I was looking at something paranormal, I slammed all of the doors, shut all of my windows, locked all of the doors, and hid under the sheets like I was a little kid. I'm still shaken up. I can't stop thinking about it. I haven't fallen asleep tonight because every time I close my eyes, I see it. I'm curious what this creature was. I know the appearance of a Wendigo is debated and seems to be controversial, but I am still terrified by what I saw. I live in rural North Carolina, with lots of woods, decently spaced out farmland, and lots of critters. I'm also a little more in tune to supernatural things than some people. Like my eyes well up with tears, and I get a spine-rolling chill if something that isn't human is around me. Last night, around 1:40ish in the morning, I'm on a call with my boyfriend, with my bedroom light on. My bedroom has a large window facing the road, and from around the corner of my eye, I see a blur of white dart back and forth twice. Immediately, I get a churn in my stomach, my eyes well up, and I get a shiver down my spine. Normally, I don't hone in on this, because I don't like to mess with spirits. My house has a few, and while I know I live here now, I also know it was once their house, and I want to be respectful to them and the place they live and died in. However, I completely freak out at this, turn my light off, slip under my blankets, and watch the window. The shivering is gone, for now, but there's a deep gut feeling of unease. My cat got up from where she was napping by the window and left my room in a hurry. Wouldn't even let me touch her, which is odd for her, because she's hyper-affectionate like a dog. And even as I'm writing this, she's in my lap purring up a storm. So that in itself was scary. However, my boyfriend has had experiences with supernatural creatures and entities, so I'm talking to him about it and he's trying to help me understand it. When describing its appearance, I tell him that the creature is tall, and then go on to, and so pale, to which he said, "Pale like me or pale pale?" And I responded, "Pale, pale, pale." The conversation keeps going, and my partner brings up skinwalkers and wendigos. I'm not claiming that this was either of those things. I simply don't know enough. Fast forward, my boyfriend asks out of the blue what his birthday is, and I responded with his birthday, asking why he would ask that. He said, "Asking for personal information is a good way to see if someone has been taken." And at the word taken, my whole body thrums, like I grabbed the cord of a guitar, pulled, and released. Later on, after I left my bedroom, locked my doors, checked that my cats are inside, and have rung a bell a few times, as a friend who is experienced in supernatural encounters tells me to do, I sit down and I begin to research. It's about 2:30, and I typed in Wendigo into Google. I receive no shiver and get the information. I then type in Skinwalker, and the full body thrum is back, so I cleared my Google search bar and exited that square, and nothing happens after that. It was Rural Hill County, Texas, 2005. We had a couple acres of land with the majority of the property, pretty much all but the house, the second house, the shed and the driveway, being completely surrounded by trees. I was 5 at the time, and got in the back of our family car, getting ready to go to the store. My dad was walking from the shed, getting ready to take me and my brother, who was 6. We peek out of the back window, looking back at our dad, as we see from the right side of the forest a large, skinny, white, solid creature with long arms and legs run out, bipedal. It ran just past our dad. I was young at the time, so bear with me, but it couldn't have been more than 50 feet away. We watched it run all the way past him directly to our shed, where it jumped on all 4s and crawled under. The shed was propped up on concrete bricks, probably about 8 inches. My brother and I returned looks to each other, and we just started crying. Almost 20 years later, and my brother and I can still describe in full detail to each other how it was relative to the house and the shed and other things. My mother tells me she believes me now. She said creepy stuff happened there all the time. That moment gave me a fear of the outside for a long time. However, if I could, I would like to see it again, just to know what it is. Two weeks ago, me and a group of buddies were having a bonfire out in Kuna, Idaho. I was feeling down that night, so I decided to unload my dirt bike and take a little night ride on some trails. I went alone and rode for probably 3 miles from the fire up to the hill. I sat up there for probably 45 minutes, and I was 100% alone up there. There was nobody around. From time to time, I would start hearing small laughter really close by. It sounded like 2 to 3 people. It wasn't constant. I would hear it every 5 minutes, and it kept getting closer. I had that funny feeling that I wasn't alone after all. So I went to start my bike, and of course it doesn't start. I was able to bump start it going down the hill, and it did not want to stay running. I don't think it sat long enough for the engine temperature to drop all the way back down. I had to keep revving it to keep it running to head back to the fire. The whole time I was really scared for no reason. I couldn't convince myself to go faster than 5 miles per hour, which was strange because I always haul ass. I have a light bar mounted on my bike, so I was able to see just fine. At first, riding back, I thought I saw shadowy figures in the corner of my eyes, but they would just disappear. I made it back safe and nothing else happened, but I knew there was something out there that night. I didn't think much of it until I heard my buddies talking about skinwalker stories in the same area. People tell me I got extremely lucky that night. I don't know what to believe. Who knows what was out there with me that night? The laughter, my bike not wanting to run, the feeling I had, and the shadow figures are all things in common I saw from other stories. It was a strange night. This happened in North Las Vegas, Nevada. This is something that I experienced about 4 or 5 years ago. I had some friends over from out of town. We were talking about the paranormal experiences we've had in the past. During the conversation, we experienced a few odd things. At first, it was just a lot of loud walking upstairs. We were home alone, and it wasn't any of us. That part wasn't very weird to me. My family and I already believed the spirit of the previous owner was still in the house. We had a lot of experiences with her, and a neighbor had told us that she had died in the garage of our house. But as we continued with our stories, one of my friends saw what looked like a large black bird flying up my staircase. When we checked, we didn't see anything there, but since we all had our own experiences and reasons to believe in the paranormal, we decided that it was a sign to stop and change the subject. After that, things settled down, and my friends left the next day and went home. A few days after my friends had left, I woke up in the middle of the night. I think it was sometime after midnight, and as I would normally do, I went downstairs and got some water from the garage. When I grabbed the water from the pack, I looked up, and very close to me, I saw a figure standing there. It was very clear. It stood about 7 or 8 feet tall. Its arms, legs, and torso looked like a very muscular man, and its head looked massive, like a wolf. Its skin and fur was black, like charcoal. As soon as I saw it, I bolted back into my house, locked the garage, and went straight to my room. The energy coming off of it was utterly terrifying. It's the only paranormal experience that I've had that I actually felt like I was in real danger. I did move from that house years ago, but still to this day, I have yet to have anyone be able to give me a solid ID on what I saw. Personally, I think it was either a demon or a skinwalker. I know there was a Native American reservation not far from the house. Additionally, just outside the neighborhood, there was a decent-sized plot of empty land that was owned by the Air Force, and my family and I had seen 2 massive coyotes, bigger than anyone in my family had ever seen, wandering the neighborhood. My house had a strange energy growing up, always did. But then when I turned 10, my mom made the worst decision in her life. She had bought me a Ouija board because I saw one online and I was begging for it, so I got one. For my 10th birthday party, I held it at my friend's house, her little trailer. There was about 6 of us, all about 10 to 11 years old. We played the Ouija board in her kitchen, which was connected to her back living room. Her back living room had extremely scary vibes to it, and I never slept back there because of it. So we just started asking questions after we lit a bunch of candles. We connected to a woman named Abby. She spelled out words that were violent and horrible. I'll just say that. After spelling out that she died because of someone else doing something bad to her, if you know what I mean, the candles went out. We were in the complete dark. Nobody blew out the candles, and then we all screamed and everyone started crying. So a while goes by, and me and my friend Alex continue playing with this board to talk to Abby. She told us that she was a young girl who passed away in a violent way, and that she was angry and wanted to harm us too. The next day, I got a message from my friend saying whatever I did to her at the sleepover wasn't funny, and now she hates me. Dramatic 10-year-olds. I had no idea what she was talking about. She sent a photo of a large scratch on her back. I continued receiving things like this from my friends. Then it happened to me. 3 large red marks on my back, like claws. A while goes by, and honestly, I'm struggling to remember what happened. I recall Abby saying she wanted a body, so I brought her a doll. The doll had light brown curly hair, a red bow, and an older Victorian red velvet dress, and green-brown eyes. Her skin was porcelain and very fragile. The doll would move around on its own, and I always became very uncomfortable around it. The older I got, the less activity happened. I thought that she had left me entirely for a while, until I saw a psychic, and she told me I had an extremely dark energy attached to me. She told me it wasn't a little girl, as Abby came off as a younger girl or woman usually. She said it was most likely a demonic energy. I used sage and everything to try to get rid of it. For a while, this worked. Then when I was 14, I bought dowsing rods, and I was messing around with them with my friends at school, boarding school, so I wasn't home. My friend was talking to her male cousin who had passed away, and all of a sudden, my other friend screams. She turns around and said something that I will never forget. "She hurt me!" We looked at her back, and there was blood everywhere. After that, we closed the rod session, and I went into a full-blown panic attack and explained everything about Abby. These girls never even knew about her, and the one girl who got scratched said that she had been dreaming about the doll I talked about. When I went home, I got rid of the doll and made a vow to never bring her up again, except for this post. I will never be able to explain why the girls and I both got scratched. Most of the activity in my house is now gone, but something is just off every time I hear her name, or anyone who remotely reminds me of the doll. One of the most evil things I have ever encountered was a little girl named Abby, who was not a little girl. Back in the early 2000s, my parents and I lived in a neighborhood that was heavily involved in witchcraft, Satanism, etc. We didn't actually discover this until we had moved away, so it all made sense afterwards. We lived in this house for 5 years. Our house was 2 stories. We had a basement, which was our family room, that also had a separate office room. We detached the door to the room so it would be permanently open, directly facing the couch we would sit on to watch TV together as a family. Adjacent to the office, we had an electric piano right against the wall, so the office entrance would be on our right if we were sitting there. To go upstairs, you'd have to directly pass the office and face the door that goes into our garage. This info will be important later. The first year was fine, but gradually the events became more malicious and sinister, to the point where we couldn't take it anymore. We were likely the only Christian family in our neighborhood, and I believe that others caught on because we didn't celebrate Halloween, and we didn't participate in giving out candy to the neighborhood kids. This angered our community, even though we were kind to others, and we kept to ourselves for the most part. Our house was egged, and we became a target of seemingly harmless pranks and house vandalism. Then, all of the paranormal events started happening after my black cat disappeared right before Halloween. We were coming home from church one night, and it was close to midnight. We pulled into our neighborhood, and sitting on the sidewalk corner all by himself was a little boy in a green shirt. My parents were slightly unsettled because it was unsafe and unusual for a child to be out this late at night. They considered talking to this boy, but when we drove up to him, he looked up, and my parents saw that he had no face. A completely blank slate where his face should be. Needless to say, we booked it home, and my parents didn't tell me at the time, because I was maybe 5 or 6, to spare me from nightmares. But some years later, they told me this and what happened. Then things started happening around the house. My mom and I used to take piano lessons. So one day, while my dad was cooking lunch, my mom was in the basement practicing on the electric piano. I was in my parents' room watching Stanley, a children's cartoon that was really popular back then. While my mom was practicing piano, a child's hand popped out of the office room and mimicked a child's voice, telling my mom to come and play. She thought it was me and told me to cut it out. The voice coerced her again to play, and my mom became irritated that I was distracting her from practicing, so she stomped into the office to find no one there. I'll never forget how pale she was when I heard her scream my name and run upstairs. She asked my dad where I was, and since I heard her, I ran to her, asking what it was that she needed from me. She asked me if I was messing with her, and I told her I had no idea what she was talking about. My dad chimed in too, and said I was in the bedroom the whole time. She concluded that it must have been her imagination, apologized to us, and went back downstairs. Not even 10 minutes later, she runs back upstairs panicking, saying that the child's hand appeared again in the office, talking to her, and she knew it couldn't have been me. She was freaked out the rest of the day for sure. Another instance was when we were watching The Ring in the basement at night. Around the time of the first jump scare of the movie, when they open the closet and see the disfigured girl, my dog starts barking like crazy at the office entrance. He would charge at it and then back away, as if something was trying to force its way closer to us. It became really cold, and I started crying because I felt scared and uncomfortable at my dog's strange behavior. My dad turned on the light in the office, but nothing was there. My dog was going nuts, chasing something we couldn't see, so we decided to call it a night and go upstairs to bed. My dog had a big crate in the garage that he would sleep in, so my dad put him in there before we went to bed. At this point, we called a minister from our church to come and pray for us. He prayed for our protection, but things got so much worse after that. A few nights later, we all woke up to screaming coming from the garage. It sounded like a little girl being brutally murdered, screaming so loud that it pierced my ears. My dog was also barking like crazy, so we knew we had to do something. My mom and I hid behind a dresser, and my dad hesitantly took a long decorative bamboo stick as a weapon to go to the garage and see what was going on. He said that he was shaking going downstairs, and the screaming got louder and more violent, right up until his hand touched the doorknob. As soon as he did, complete silence. It was eerie and too quiet. The only thing making noise was my dog whimpering and barking, so my dad got him as quickly as possible and noped right back upstairs. We started sleeping in the same room after that. Once we settled back down, my mom and I fell asleep first, but my dad was wide awake. He said that he could hear something pressing buttons on the TV remote on his bedside table. He didn't dare look, but shut his eyes and pretended to sleep until he eventually did. Another day, my mom was at work, and my dad was outside mowing the lawn. Being an only child, not interested in AOL dial-up internet yet, I had to find ways to entertain myself. I was spinning in circles until I made myself dizzy. Mid-spin, I saw a man standing in the hallway with the gun pointed right at me. I was so startled, but I was so dizzy, so I fell over, scared to death. I screamed for my dad and ran slothily to the front door. I didn't want to look back if he was still there. Dad was worried sick for me in my panic state, but what can he do? What could any of us have done? Dad put up the house for sale and sold it to the first buyer. We were out of there so quick it wasn't even funny. These events traumatized me, and I'm extremely hypersensitive to evil spirits and evil energy. Horror movies don't scare me at all compared to the real fear and panic you feel in those moments. When I was about 11, I attended a birthday party on a farm in the middle of nowhere. They pulled out a Ouija board and asked it questions. They were all answered correctly according to the kiddos. I didn't participate, but I was in the room. I was young and I had no idea, and I thought it was just a board game. But ever since that day, I was never the same. I would see and feel a menacing presence. It seemed to follow everywhere I went and affected me emotionally and mentally to the point where my doctor diagnosed me with bipolar disorder. Fast forward to about age 24 or 25. My mom noticed my behavior had gotten worse and erratic, and since she was Buddhist, she brought me to the temple. The priest or monk advised my mom that I had a Western ghost attached to me for the last decade, and to send it off with offerings. I believe she recited a prayer and offered it fruits and food. This is normal in Taoism. And since that day, I have felt like such a huge weight has lifted off my shoulders, and have felt a lot lighter. But that night, after taking a shower and stepping out, all 10 of the little light bulbs atop my mirror shattered onto me, and I received a cut on my foot. It felt like a last F.U. to me. Fast forward to 8 years later. I experienced something at my family's house when I was visiting last week. I was having an intense disagreement with my fiancé in the living room, and I felt irrationally upset and angry. And I saw an anger in him that I had never seen before. I kept seeing a head pop in and out really fast, multiple times, coming from the wall next to the kitchen hallway. It felt very mischievous. It was a dark shadow. I thought it was a family member checking in, or my eyes playing tricks. But it happened multiple times, and I kept seeing it over and over. The next couple days, I felt uneasy, and felt like something was watching me. Then my fiancé sees a figure in the house next to us. He would tilt his head, confused, as to why this person was staring at him, and copying his movements, moving his head right to left, and the shadow would copy him. He was so startled he called out loudly to me. Mind you, my fiancé is a huge skeptic, and paranormal things never happened to him. I knew something was off. There were a couple of nights where I felt like we were sleep-talking to each other, and I'd wake up feeling a presence. It's continued for the last 3 days. So I feel like something may have followed us home.